Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Douglas. Sarah Douglas was born in 1987 in Sacramento, California, into a family of 5 siblings. They always get along and help each other. From an early age, her parents commented that she was a girl with a gentle and cheerful personality. However, during her teenage years, her personality changed significantly. She started associating with a group of troubled teens and to spend all her free time with them. As a result, she quickly dropped out of school. At the age of 19, Sarah started dating a boyfriend named Nicholas. In 2007, when she was 20, she became pregnant. By this time, her relationship with Nicholas was deteriorating, and they often fought over minor issues. The arrival of their child only increased the conflict between them, causing them to decide to separate. Nicholas moved to Santa Rosa, a city 150 kilometers away, where he began a new life with another woman. Despite being separated, he still cares for their son, and the two share custody. Sarah found herself in a challenging situation. As a young single mother, with a young child to care for, and education level is not high, she had difficulty making ends meet. Her parents were busy raising their own younger children and couldn't offer her much support. Although her mother and sister helped whenever they could, it still wasn't enough financially. She needed to find a way to earn money. Eventually, Sarah decided to work as an escort, drawn in by the good pay and flexible hours. She has an attractive appearance and quickly became famous in this industry, helping her earn a good income. However, she did not know much about the risks involved in this profession. After a few years as a call girl, she met Orville Fleming, a man who gave her the stability and security she had always craved. She hopes to quit her current job, find a husband, as well as a father for her son, and finally get her life on track. She believes so blindly in her dream that she does not notice the dangers around her. Orville Fleming was born in 1958 in California. Before he met Sarah, he was a happy husband and father. He dedicated over 30 years to his career as a fire chief, earning the respect of his community. He served for 24 years, including 3 years in Modesto. In 1993, he became a fire engineer with the California Department of Forestry. Thanks to his excellent performance, he was promoted to captain and became a battalion chief in 2012. Throughout his career, Orville built an impressive resume and reputation. He also worked part-time as an instructor at a fire academy, where he shared his valuable experience and trained future firefighters. Through hard work, he earned about $130,000 a year, enough to enjoy a wealthy lifestyle. When his children were grown, he and his wife could enjoy a comfortable life and their own pleasures. However, beneath the facade of this seemingly happy family lay a troubling secret about Orville. He spent most of his money on encounters with young escorts, as he found family life dull and craved excitement with attractive young women. He met these women through dating sites and escort services, and that led him to Sarah, a 20-year-old girl, 30 years younger than him. In his intimate relationships with these young girls, he sought the variety that was missing from his long-term marriage. His wife is a discreet woman, so he often turns to call girls to satisfy his private needs. After meeting the beautiful Sarah online, Orville began dating her regularly. She charges $300 an hour for each meeting. He became very fond of her, and their encounters began to occur more frequently. She opened up to him about her struggles, earning Orville's sympathy, which gradually evolved into love. He loved Sarah so much that he decided to divorce his wife to start a new life with her, and she agreed. Orville decided to take action immediately. He soon had a conversation with his wife, leading him to leave her and their 2 children to be with his mistress, Sarah. he purchased a house in a quiet suburb near Sacramento. Sarah joyfully shared the news with her family, believing that her life would improve and that she could finally create a stable family. She promised Orville that she would quit the escort service and never return to that line of work. Everything seemed to be going well. However, Sarah's family was concerned about the age difference between her and her boyfriend. She was only 24 years old, while her boyfriend Orville was 54 years old enough to be her father. However, he seemed to be a thoughtful family man, which helped ease their worries. They saw this as a happy time in Sarah's life and supported her, not wanting to affect her happiness. At the start of their life together, everything seemed perfect and joyful. Orville tries to arrange the house so that Sarah and her son feel as comfortable as possible. She gave up her job as a call girl and started a normal life, becoming a housewife. Their life felt like a fairy tale, a perfect home, and a loving relationship. Sarah wishes to have a closer relationship, and she also wants to marry Orville. Her dreams seemed to come true when Orville presented her with an expensive engagement ring, adorned with a large diamond. She accepted his proposal, but her happiness was short-lived. Orville turned out to be very jealous and controlling. He was possessive and wanted to monitor her every move, making her report on everything she did. He realized that she was financially dependent on him, and he used that to control her life, making her completely attached to him. The relationship lasted several years until Sarah grew impatient. Orville exhibits obsessive behavior and wants to control the people she interacts with, even in public. This led to suspicions and arguments between them. Additionally, conflicts arose with Orville's wife, Megan, who was still legally married to him. He filed for divorce, but the process took a long time, giving her more time to pressure him over financial matters. By early 2014, the situation had become very tense. Megan frequently calls Orville to ask him to pay off his debt and give her more money. She was particularly upset about the large sums he spent on call girl service, which often left Sarah in tears. At this point, Sarah and Orville's relationship had significantly deteriorated. She began spending more time with her mother and sister, and during one conversation, she admitted that she wanted to end the relationship due to the mounting problems. Sarah realized that continuing the relationship was a mistake. However, she did not think that her decision to leave him could lead to serious consequences. On Wednesday, April 30, 2014, Sarah's day started like any other. She sent her son to visit his biological father for a few days and planned a vacation with her mother and sister. They first went to a casino where they enjoyed themselves until 11 p.m. During that time, Orville kept calling and texting her, but she chose not to respond. He was upset that she ignored his request not to have fun while he was away. As midnight approached, Stephanie, Sarah's sister, took her back to the house she shared with Orville, and they said their goodbyes. Once inside the house, Sarah immediately noticed a strong smell of gas. She went to the kitchen and saw that the gas burners left on. Alarmed, she called her sister Stephanie to let her know that Orville had neglected to turn off the gas. It was obvious he wanted to poison her. Suddenly, a scream was heard, startling she. Orville had unexpectedly shown up, disrupt her and Stephanie's phone call. Then, all Stephanie could hear was her terrified screams. Assuming it was just another argument between lovers, Stephanie decided to hang up and go to bed. Early in the morning, Stephanie decided to call Sarah to find out what had happened the previous night. She dialed Sarah's number, but was surprised when there was no answer, as Sarah usually stayed in touch. As anxiety grew over Sarah's lack of response, she and her aunt went to Sarah's house around 8 a.m. to check. They rang the doorbell and knocked for a long time, but no one answered. Just as they were about to leave, her aunt tried the door handle, and to their surprise, the door opened. This was unusual behavior, which made them even more worried. but they decided to go inside. Once inside, they found the living room in disarray, with furniture out of place and items scattered everywhere. They cautiously made their way to the bedroom, hoping to find Sarah. At that moment, a neighbor heard them screaming from the window. He saw them running out of Sarah's house, clearly terrified. When he asked what was wrong, they told him there was a human body inside the house. The neighbor immediately called 911 to report the situation. By 9 a.m., officers were on the scene. Several officers worked together to calm and interview the witness. In the bedroom, the officers discovered clear evidence of a struggle. A young woman lay face down on the floor, showing no signs of life. She had injuries on her body and neck, including cuts and a sheet tied around her throat. Blood was splattered on the bed and walls. In the bathroom, they found a bloody towel thrown into the washing machine. All the windows were tightly closed. They quickly secured the crime scene and started their investigation. Forensic experts arrived to gather evidence, and the body was taken to the morgue for an autopsy to determine the cause of death. The witnesses identified Sarah Douglas, who was 26 years old when she died. The autopsy revealed that she suffered at least 14 stab and cut wounds, likely inflicted with a kitchen knife. There were also signs of suffocation on her neck, which was determined to be the cause of death. Forensic experts discovered multiple bruises and evidence of beatings on her body, indicating she had fought back fiercely. Blood tests showed that at the time of her death, she was neither drunk nor under the influence of drugs. Sarah's aunt and sister informed detectives that she had previously worked as a call girl, but quit after meeting Orville. Despite their age difference, she believed he was a good man who could help her build a better life. However, their relationship had become strained in recent months, and she had decided to end things with him. Additionally, Sarah's sister Stephanie informed detectives about everything she heard on her cell phone the night before. It was likely that Orville attacked Sarah and killed her out of jealousy. As a result, he became the primary suspect in the brutal murder, and a warrant was issued for his arrest. Despite their best efforts to search for him, they still couldn't find him. He was not at home, at work, with his ex-wife Megan, or with his relatives. He had gone into hiding, prompting the police to place him on a statewide wanted list. Just a day after the search began, Orville's official car was found abandoned near a house, but there was no sign of him being there, nor any clues as to where he might have gone. Police have gathered detailed information about Orville and issued a wanted poster stating that he is a particularly dangerous criminal. The database indicated that he owned 2 pistols, but they were not found in his car or at the murder scene. It is believed he was carrying them and may resist arrest. Citizens were alerted to stay vigilant and report any suspicious individuals, while also being advised to exercise caution and avoid confrontations with Orville, who may be armed and very dangerous. The search operation lasted over 2 days. During this time, family and friends gathered near Sarah's home, closely following the search and hoping for any news. They came to honor her memory as a victim of domestic violence. The media also took a keen interest in the case, tracking the police investigation closely. Orville's colleagues were equally shocked by the incident. They knew him as a kind, positive person and a professional with a stellar reputation who had consistently demonstrated his integrity on the job. However, it is worrying that he disappears soon after the death of his young lover Sarah, raising suspicions about his involvement. 5 days later, Orville was fired from his position as head of the fire department because he failed to report to work without any explanation. Given the circumstances, this was merely a bureaucratic formality. Meanwhile, the search is being extended to areas where he may be hiding. He is experienced in outdoor activities and regularly participates in challenging hikes. His endurance and survival skills are evident in extreme conditions. He is known for training in remote wilderness areas for for long periods of time that few people know about. Even though there is a lot of information surrounding the case, the situation seems to be becoming more tense. Orville's wife, Megan, decided to make the situation more serious. She claimed that he and other members of the California Fire Brigade often invited escorts to the fire station for entertainment. Megan said she had seen videos showing these women arriving at the fire station and having fun inside the fire trucks. She also mentioned that a woman named Sarah had been present on a couple of occasions. The police received information regarding the situation and visited the fire station to speak with the employees and verify the details. However, they were unable to locate any video recordings or photographs that Megan had mentioned. Megan could not provide this evidence either, leaving the rumors unconfirmed. In addition, Megan also said that during the time Orville was having an affair with Sarah, he had run up a large debt due to his addiction to prostitutes. She asked him to pay the debt, but he never did. She also mentioned a diamond engagement ring that she suspected was fake. She also convinced the police that Sarah, Orville's mistress, had been stalking her, alleging that Sarah frequently called and threatened her. As a result, she sought a restraining order against Sarah, but this claim could not be substantiated as there was no evidence of harassment. It appeared that she may have fabricated these accusations to further tarnish Sarah's reputation in the eyes of the public. After 2 weeks of thorough investigation, the court denied Megan's request for divorce. On May 26, 2014, Orville was finally captured at a bus stop near where his official car was found. He had been hiding in the forest, but was spotted when he ventured out to buy food, despite having shaved his mustache and attempted to disguise himself. He was taken into custody without issue. He did not have a gun and surrendered to police. After his arrest, he needed special supervision. On May 20, 2014, Orville appeared in court. He claimed he could not afford a lawyer, but maintained his innocence. 10 days after the initial hearing, the city's road patrol began a new investigation into illegal activities involving members of the fire department where Orville worked. By October 2014, after the hearing had officially lasted more than a month, Orville formally pleaded not guilty. Sarah's family was shocked by Orville's arrogance, especially when he winked at the public defender. The prosecution detailed the troubled relationship between Sarah and he. He is portrayed as a jealous man who wants complete control over Sarah's life. He prohibited her from working, took away her personal bank account and mobile phone, and restricted her from using her own vehicle. Meanwhile, an investigation is underway into misconduct at the fire department where Orville worked. On December 29, 2014, the investigation confirmed that there was inappropriate sexual behavior between firefighters after hours. Although the video recordings mentioned by Megan were never located, but the investigation led to 16 firefighters being placed on administrative leave. In June 2015, the Orville trial entered its final stages. The defense presented defendant Orville in a favorable light, arguing that he was a victim influenced by Sarah, a prostitute with drug and alcohol problems. They argued that he was exploited and pointed out that he did not recall the argument with Sarah. This strategy was intended to help reduce the charges against him. As part of this strategy, the defense also sought to discredit Sarah. On the night of the incident, a violent argument erupted, which was overheard by her older sister, Stephanie. However, Orville described experiencing a dissociative state, likening it to being a zombie, as he went to the kitchen to get a knife. He then returned to the bedroom and stabbed Sarah multiple times. Next, he began strangling her until she showed no signs of life. He maintained that he could not remember the details, stating that the incident played out in his mind like disjointed fragments. Orville attempted to sway the jury by expressing deep remorse for his actions. The prosecution aimed to demonstrate that he was not telling the truth. They presented recorded interrogations, where his statements contradicted his testimony during the trial. This discrepancy damaged his credibility and led the court to pursue a first-degree murder charge. On June 24, 2015, just 2 days after the debate ended and just before his birthday, Orville Fleming was charged with second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Sarah's death had a devastating impact, not only on her, but also on those around her. A few months later, her brother Leroy, who was very close to her, died, unable to cope with the grief of losing his younger sister. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Isla Reynolds. Isla Reynolds was born on April 4, 2010 in Waterville, Maine, USA. With blonde hair, blue eyes, and a charming smile, she was an adorable child who loved music and dancing. Her parents, Trista Reynolds and Justin DiPietro, had a brief romantic relationship in the summer of 2009, which resulted in Trista becoming pregnant. However, the couple broke up and Justin was initially a bit apprehensive about becoming a father, even doubting whether he was really the biological father of the child. When Trista gave birth to Isla, the child bore a strong resemblance to Justin, but he initially refused to acknowledge Isla as his daughter. However, after a paternity test in July 2010, Justin finally accepted his role as her father. As a result, Child Protective Services ordered Justin to pay child support in December 2010. Although Trista and Justin did not have a formal custody agreement in court, they did have an agreement in which Trista, who resided in Portland, would have primary physical custody. It was not until mid-2011, after Isla's first birthday, that Justin began spending time with his daughter. Since he lived an hour and a half away and visits were scheduled to be during the day and very brief, they agreed that Justin could occasionally take Isla with him but never overnight. Trista gave birth to her first child, Isla. Soon after, she became pregnant with her new boyfriend Raymond's child. In 2011, Trista had her second child, a son named Raymond Jr., and Isla became a big sister. Trista cared for both children until October 13, 2011, when Child Protective Services intervened due to concerns. The details of the complaint that led to the meeting are unclear, but it is known that Trista had a substance abuse problem. That day, officials gave her an ultimatum: overcome her addiction or lose custody of her children. In order to avoid losing custody, Trista entered a 10-day rehabilitation program and left the children in the care of her mother and sister. Isla and Raymond Jr. were her world, and she was determined not to lose them. By October 2011, Justin had seen Isla about 5 to 10 times. However, just 4 days after Trista was taken into custody, on October 17, Justin and his family decided to take custody of Isla. Justin's mother, Phoebe DiPietro, contacted Child Protective Services and was approved to take Isla. The agency promptly notified Trista's relatives of the decision. However, Isla's aunt, Jessica, strongly disagreed with Child Protective Services' decision, accusing Justin of abusing Isla in the past and expressing concerns for the child's well-being. The officials argued that a father had more custody rights than an aunt. After being granted permission, Justin and his family went to pick up Isla, but they did not know the exact address. To resolve the issue, Child Protective officials provided the location through Officer Charles Weaver. Officer Charles accompanied Justin and his mother to Jessica's home, where Isla was staying with her aunt. While the grandmother waited in the car, Justin and Officer Charles approached the door. A dramatic scene ensued as Jessica pleaded with the police not to take Isla away, warning that she would not give up the child willingly. Despite the stress, police observed that Isla appeared to be very happy, constantly laughing, playing, and even trying to strike up a conversation. Trista's sister, Jessica, asked the police to observe how Isla's behavior changed when Justin arrived. When Justin approached, Isla immediately began crying and tried to get away from him. Despite her distress, the police handed Isla over to her father. Isla struggled and screamed, even trying to bite the police officer when she was placed in Justin's arms. Jessica explained to Officer Charles that Isla was extremely afraid of her father and that it was not in her best interest to take the child away from her family. Charles explained that if it were up to him, he would not let Isla go with Justin, but that it was not his decision and that he was there to enforce the directive from Child Services. In order to transfer custody, one option is to reach an agreement with the child's mother or seek the judge's approval through a court proceeding. However, in a recent custody exchange, neither of these steps were taken. Instead, the decision was made by the Child Protective Services supervisor. Unfortunately, the supervisor awarded custody to the child's father, Justin. Before the court grants sole custody to a parent, it typically conducts a thorough evaluation, including a background check and home visit. However, this did not occur in Isla's case. The primary consideration in custody decisions is the best interests of the child, but there are no records to support the decision made in Isla's case. Analysts say the only reason to remove a child from her maternal relatives is if the child is in imminent danger. If officials believed Isla was in danger, it is unclear why her younger brother, Raymond Jr., was not removed from the home. The father took her to his family home in Waterville. His 47-year-old mother, Phoebe, his 24-year-old sister, Alicia, and her young daughter, Gabriella, also lived there. Justin, the 25-year-old father, lived in a basement, a large, partially finished room, while the rest of the family lived upstairs. Trista called Justin every day during his rehabilitation to talk to Isla and make sure everything was okay. She did not notice anything unusual in these calls. On October 20, 2011, when Trista was on her 8th day of treatment, a meeting was held to discuss Isla's situation. Attendees included members of Child Protective Services, 2 doctors, Trista, her sister Jessica, an attorney, and Justin, who participated by phone. As a result of the discussion, an agreement was reached that Isla would be returned to Trista on October 22, 2011, after completing her addiction recovery program. It was also decided that Justin would take Isla to a treatment center on October 21 to visit her mother. Although things initially seemed to be going well for Trista, the situation soon took a turn for the worse, with no agreement being made and implemented. Trista desperately sought the help of Child Protective Services to enforce their original agreement, but her repeated calls were unsuccessful. So she proposed a temporary solution to Justin. He would continue to care for their daughter, and she would have regular visitation rights to Isla. However, on November 12, 2011, Justin took their daughter to the emergency room after she was injured. After conducting relevant tests, doctors determined that she had a broken arm. Justin told the doctor that the accident happened the night before, November 11th. It was raining, he said, and he slipped and fell on her while on the porch with Isla in his arms. He added that although the girl was crying, she did not appear to be injured, and it was not until the next morning that it became clear that she needed urgent medical attention. By the following Monday, the orthopedist said that surgery was not necessary and that the injury would heal on its own. A week later, on November 26th, at a third medical appointment to assess the child's progress, the specialist said everything was going according to plan. Trista was present at that medical appointment to closely monitor her daughter's recovery, never thinking that it would be the last time she would hold her. The mother's decision to seek custody of Isla marked a turning point. On December 15, 2011, she filed a petition with the court to begin the custody process due to ongoing disputes over visitation and communication with her daughter. Just 2 days later, on December 17, 2011, Justin contacted the police, reporting Isla missing from his mother's home, where he was staying with his girlfriend Courtney Roberts and his sister Alicia. According to Justin, Isla had been put to bed the night before, but when they woke up, the 20-month-old was no longer there. That morning, Trista had gone to visit her husband Raymond at a correctional facility in a coastal Maine town near the Canadian border. Raymond was serving time for arson. Trista was in the passenger seat, asleep, while her father-in-law, Robert Fourier, drove. Robert receives a call from Trista's father with alarming news: Trista's child, Isla, is missing. Robert is momentarily stunned by the news, then finds a safe place to stop the car and wake Trista. Still half asleep, Trista hears her father's voice on the phone and tries to grasp the terrible news of her child's disappearance. Panicked, she immediately instructs Robert to change direction and go meet the police who are looking for Isla. Trista's hour-and-a-half journey feels like a century as she anxiously tries to contact Justin, growing increasingly frightened when he does not answer her calls. Upon arriving at the police station, Trista and her father-in-law, Robert, give their statements. 30 minutes later, Trista's father joins them. Justin called 911 at 8:49 a.m. that morning to report her missing, saying that Isla was last seen the night before at 10 p.m. by Justin's sister, Alicia, who had gone to check on Isla before going to bed. However, by Saturday morning, Isla had disappeared from her crib, with Justin not specifying the exact time she had gone missing in the call. Justin's theory was that Isla had been abducted by a stranger. As news of her disappearance quickly spread, the police quickly launched an investigation. In a statement to the media, the police chief assured that they were working diligently to find Isla at all costs. To aid in the search, the police thoroughly searched the house for any potential clues that could lead them to Isla. On the second day of the search, Sunday, December 18th, trained search dogs were brought in to assist. The area around the house where Isla was last seen was thoroughly searched and a detailed search was conducted at Trista's home. Due to the search, Trista had to temporarily stay in a motel with her mother and youngest son. By December 19th, the third day after the disappearance, the FBI was brought in to assist in the search. By this time, approximately 75 people from various agencies were involved in the investigation. State police had seized 2 vehicles from Justin's home, a 1996 Ford Explorer owned by Justin and a silver 4-door sedan owned by Justin's girlfriend, Courtney, who had been present the night of the disappearance. The news quickly attracted local media attention, and in the days that followed, Trista appeared in several local media outlets, criticizing Justin and implying that he was responsible for the disappearance. As the news spread nationwide, Trista continued to express her concerns, saying that Justin, as the last person to see her daughter alive, was the only one who could answer her questions. Finally, Justin released a statement to the media on Wednesday, asserting that he knew nothing about Isla's disappearance and assuring the public that he and his family would cooperate fully with the investigation to ensure Isla's safe return. However, in his statement, Justin admitted that Isla was in his sole custody at the time of her disappearance. But he lied, saying this was achieved through an agreement with the mother. Furthermore, he added that Trista was incapable of caring for the child. As time went on, the search effort expanded. The FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team, CARD, canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on every door. They contacted every household, returned to the area multiple times, and interviewed neighbors to gather vital information. With a team of 75 dedicated officers, the police demonstrated their unwavering commitment to solving the case. Within 10 days of Justin's initial report, police had spent approximately 5,000 hours searching and were actively pursuing 330 leads. A massive search effort for Isla involved approximately 50 civilian volunteers from a search and rescue association. In addition, a $30,000 reward was offered to anyone who could provide valuable information that could assist in finding Isla. Isla's devoted mother, Trista, played a key role in bringing the case to the forefront. She worked with the support group to organize numerous events, such as vigils and parades, to honor Isla's memory. Her persistence ensured that the case remained in the public eye, with news cameras continuing to cover the story. Trista, along with other spokespeople, provided reporters with updates to keep the story on the front page. Initially, police treating the case as a missing persons investigation rather than a homicide, however, began to change when police sealed off Justin's home and the surrounding area. Police also seized his car and made a major announcement, further altering the public's perception of the case at the direction of the head of the Criminal Prosecution Agency, who made a public announcement. The police officially ruled out the possibility that Isla had run away on her own. On the 13th day of the investigation, the sheriff transferred the case to the state police's Major Crimes Unit. In this announcement, a difficult reality was revealed. The case had been moved from a missing persons investigation to a criminal investigation. In the early days, Justin kept a low profile and avoided the media, but over time, he began to appear more frequently. In one of his interviews on the Today Show, he addressed the change in the law enforcement message, asserting that Isla had been kidnapped and begging the person who kidnapped her to bring her home. He stated that he went on the show to approach whoever kidnapped his daughter and tell them that their actions were wrong. He stressed that they had no right to make such a decision because they were not her father and stressed that Isla needed to stay home with her family. When asked about his previous silence, Justin admitted that he had refrained from speaking out because he initially thought Isla would return. He said that the police had advised him to stay away from the media, a part confirmed by a Department of Public Safety spokesperson. The spokesperson clarified that this advice was only given initially, and that the police had later encouraged Isla's parents to make more public appearances. Justin addressed the allegations against him directly. He invited the TV host to spend a day with him to see firsthand what he was going through. He expressed his appreciation for the police's efforts. Justin stressed that the truth remains the same, no matter how many times someone may be accused or called a liar. He believes that the truth is patient and will eventually come out. In late January, police announced that Isla's blood had been found in several locations in Justin's home. They also indicated that, although there was not enough evidence to make an arrest, Justin, Courtney, and Alicia, the three adults who lived in the home where Isla was last seen, were considered suspects. Stephen McCausland, a spokesman for the Department of Public Safety, stated that the family's account of the events was not supported by any forensic evidence, dismissing the possibility that someone had broken into Isla's bedroom undetected and taken her while the three adults were in the home. 6 months after Isla was reported missing, on May 30, 2012, police stated that there was no possibility that she was still alive. Trista's family allowed reporters into their home for a press conference announcing the news. Upon hearing the news, Trista immediately burst into tears, which quickly turned to anger as she accused Justin of killing her daughter. For Trista's family, learning the details of the forensic tests conducted at Justin's home was extremely difficult. They knew that Isla's blood had been found and that the amount of blood represented 25% of her total blood volume. However, they never saw the evidence until January 2013, when everything that had been discovered was revealed to them. Justin's 1996 Ford Explorer had a child seat in the back, where Isla's blood was found on the left shoulder strap. Dried vomit was also found in the back seat. In the girl's bedroom, police discovered blood on her princess pink sneakers, which were on the floor next to her crib, as well as on the face and arms of her doll. They believe she may have tried to clean the blood from her mouth with her toy. A blood stain was also found on the living room sofa. Most of the blood was found in a basement, where a pool of Isla's blood was found in the middle of the mattress Justin shared with Courtney. In addition, vomit and a pink strand that looked like the hair of a toy were found on the bed. Justin's sneakers, which had Isla's blood on the tongue and inside, were found next to the bed. There were also blood stains on the cement floor around the bed and on the walls, which corresponded to Isla's height. An expert determined that some of the blood drops were the size of a dime, indicating blunt force trauma. Furthermore, experts pointed out that some of the blood spatter in the house could have been caused by Isla's coughing, suggesting that she had suffered both internal and external injuries. Police said that they had used bed sheets to clean up Isla's blood. This was a horrifying revelation for Trista and her family, and they still had many more disturbing details to learn. Luminol tests conducted in the house revealed traces of blood that were not visible to the naked eye. The photo slides from the house left Trista deeply distressed. She panicked and left the police station, now more convinced than ever that her daughter, Isla, had been murdered. The police wanted to show her more photos, but she refused, saying she had seen enough. Months earlier, when the police presented the same photographic evidence, he showed no reaction. The police also tried to show Justin's family the photos. They refused. They were not interested. Justin's girlfriend, Courtney, who was with him the night Isla disappeared, reacted in a similar way. Overwhelmed and helpless, Trista told the press that Justin, Alicia, and Courtney were still walking down the street as if nothing had happened. 8 months after receiving a critical report in September 2013, Trista decided to write a letter to the press about the evidence and photos she had seen. She was frustrated by the slow progress and wanted to rekindle public interest in the case. In the spring of 2016, a group of journalists went to Justin's mother's house. His younger sister, Alicia, answered the door and was asked about the journalist who asked about the blood evidence. She mentioned that Isla was lactose intolerant and had been throwing up. However, a quick online search revealed that common symptoms of lactose intolerance include gas, bloating, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. While nausea and vomiting can occur, they are not the most typical symptoms, let alone vomiting blood. In 2017, at Trista's request, a judge officially declared Isla dead, determining that her death occurred on or about December 17, 2011, when her father, Justin, reported her missing. With this declaration, Trista and her attorney filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Justin, claiming he caused Isla's death through intentional unlawful acts and caused her pain and suffering before her death, including fear, terror, and physical injury. At the time of the lawsuit, Isla was still missing, and Justin, along with his attorney, denied any wrongdoing, describing the lawsuit as baseless. In response, Trista held a press conference where she addressed Justin directly, questioning whether he had a conscience. She said, "I could see it in your eyes, and you knew it was a problem. You looked at me, and I knew you cared." In early 2023, a judge granted Trista's request to add his mother, Phoebe, and his sister, Alicia, to the wrongful death lawsuit. The 3 defendants are now facing civil charges of wrongful death, intentional infliction of pain and suffering, and unlawful interference with the body of a deceased person. Additionally, Justin faces charges of failing to fulfill his parental duty of care to a minor child. Trista and her attorney understand that they will not receive any financial compensation from Justin. That is not the purpose of the lawsuit. Their purpose is to learn the truth behind Isla's disappearance. There are many strange things about Isla's disappearance. The police informed Trista of a shocking detail. On the morning Isla went missing, Justin drove to Portland and back before calling 911. He claimed that he thought Trista had kidnapped Isla and was looking for Trista, but he never contacted her or any of her family members. Instead, during that long drive, he called a friend who had sold him a $25,000 life insurance policy on Isla just weeks earlier. Adding to the strangeness, Justin stayed at this friend's house while the police were investigating the case. This was surprising, especially since he had been absent from his daughter's life for 9 months of Trista's pregnancy and for most of Isla's life. Trista also shared that she had received strange text messages from Justin in the week after Isla went missing. He expressed fears that someone might try to kidnap Isla. The last time he mentioned someone trying to kidnap her was on December 11th, just 6 days before Isla was reported missing. After her disappearance, his messages became threatening and cryptic, leaving Trista wondering what he really meant. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Su Xinqi. On July 4, 2009, several lecturers from the finance department of a Chinese university gathered to work overtime to manage and monitor the school's finances and expenses from the previous semester. One lecturer, Tam Xingfai, 43, was scheduled to attend but was missing. At 11 a.m., a colleague named Ma tried to call Xingfai's cell phone but received no response. Despite the heavy workload, Ma was not too worried at first. He thought Xingfai might be taking care of his family's dog, which had a skin disease. Xingfai had planned to take the dog to the vet, so Ma assumed that was where he was. On July 5th, the university's finance department held a meeting, but Xingfai failed to attend for the second time. Ma tried calling his cell phone again, but no one answered. Unfortunately, Ma did not have Xingfai's home phone number, so he could not contact him that way. By July 6th, Xingfai had been absent from work for 2 days and had not contacted any of his colleagues. Eventually, one of his colleagues reported the situation to the finance department. Xingfai's supervisors had his home landline number, so they called there, but like his cell phone, no one answered. They called the library where his 33-year-old wife, Han Tong Yen, worked. Library staff confirmed that she had also been absent from work without permission. The couple lived in Zhongshan, Guangdong Province, China, and had been married for 11 years. They have 2 daughters, the eldest, Tam Hu-man, 10, and the youngest, Tam Hu-wing, 7. Despite their financial difficulties and living in an abandoned recycling station on Waju South Road, they are known to be kind, cheerful, and positive people with well-behaved children. Xingfai often takes his daughters into town to have fun, leading some to believe that the family went on vacation together. However, something unexpected happened that prevented them from returning home. His colleagues spent quite a while trying to contact him by calling both his cell phone and his home phone, hoping to reach him. Finally, someone answered, but instead of a family member, it was a middle-aged man who was a stranger. The man claimed to be Xingfai's cousin and said that the family had gone to Dongguan, Guangdong Province, China for the summer vacation. He said that Xingfai had entrusted his phone to him for safekeeping. When asked when the family would return to Hong Kong, the man could not answer. After repeated inquiries, he hung up and turned off the phone. This call only added to the suspicion and anxiety of his colleagues towards Xingfai. Xingfai was always hardworking and responsible, never missing work without a good reason. If he planned to go on vacation with his children, he would make sure their schools were notified in advance. In addition, his family kept 9 stray dogs, raising concerns about who would take care of them if they traveled to the mainland and how they would be able to afford the trip to China. Previously, Xingfai lived with his parents. His father was a sailor and his mother worked at a paper mill. Unfortunately, his father went missing and was never found, which caused his mother to become ill and eventually end up in a nursing home. Xingfai's abandonment of her was considered completely out of character for him, especially since he visited her every week. They eventually decided to contact the police. One of Xingfai's co-workers led the police to Xingfai's house, which was located at an abandoned recycling station in Pingqi village. During their journey, they saw a short man through the fence of Xingfai's property. He quickly disappeared from sight, but they didn't think much of it and continued on. When they reached the gate of the house, they found that the door was locked. The police then inspected the property and interviewed the neighbors. The abandoned recycling station covers an area of nearly 450 square meters, of which only 90 square meters are built, leaving nearly 350 square meters as empty flower beds. The construction of the building was not permitted. The previous owner had built several corrugated iron sheds on the site for waste recycling. A stone house next door was used as a pig farm, and there were few residents in the area. As a result, the police were only able to question one neighbor, an elderly woman surnamed Wong, who lived alone across the street. She said she had lived in the area for a long time and was familiar with the family's routine, noting that they often spent their afternoons working in the garden. However, she had little information about their personal lives, and commented that the family rarely had visitors due to the isolated nature of the site. The only relative who visited and contacted Xing Fai was Xing Fai's middle-aged cousin, Zhu Wang. Zhu Wang did not have much information about Xing Fai's family. He only knew that Xing Fai's cousin lived in a nearby stone house. Xing Fai's colleague informed the police that his call was answered by Zhu Wang, leading them to believe that he was the one on the other end of the line. However, Zhu Wang said that he did not know the address of Xing Fai or his cousin. Prior to these events, the police went to Xing Fai's house to investigate in Pingqi village. That same day, the police found a man at a stone house on Huazhu Road number 74. The man, Su Xingqi, 42, confirmed that he was Xing Fai's cousin. He said that he often went to Xing Fai's house to help with renovations and gardening. When asked about the phone call, he said that the family was in China for a vacation. On July 5, Xing Fai visited his mother at the nursing home. He then went home to tell Su about his plans to travel to Dongguan, China for a few days. Su explained that using Xing Fai's Hong Kong mobile phone in mainland China would incur high roaming charges, so he asked Su to keep the phone until he returned. The witness and Xing Fai's colleague who saw him running away was actually Zhu Wang, who had just finished feeding the family dog. Su appeared calm and there were no significant inconsistencies in his testimony. When the police asked Su if he had the keys to the family's house, he said no. The police continued to investigate the area. When the police questioned the villagers about Su, they discovered that he had been dishonest. Villagers confirmed that Su often went to the house to work and could open both the gate and the door himself, even when no one else was there. This suggested that he might have had a key to the house. In fact, he did have a key, as Zhu Wang saw Xing Fai hand the key to Su at the university office, asking Su to get the key for him. Later, when the police returned to Su's house to ask about the key, he denied having the key again. He claimed that he had used the spare key for renovations but had returned it, so he said he could not enter the house. During this interrogation, Su seemed much more nervous than during the first interrogation, and he deliberately avoided important details. When the police threatened to search his house, Su panicked and suddenly remembered that he actually had another house key that he had not returned. He then took the key from the closet and gave it to the police. Although Su's behavior was suspicious, there was no concrete evidence linking him to the family's disappearance, so the police decided to keep an eye on him while they continued their investigation. They used a spare key to enter Xing Fai's home, where they found the interior in disarray, suggesting a break-in. The police also found some fresh blood stains on the walls, suggesting that someone had been murdered in the house. In the kitchen, they found a sink full of dirty dishes, which raised doubts about the idea that the family had traveled to China, as they would not have left the house in such a state. In the couple's master bedroom, the police discovered the family's identity cards in the wardrobe. The police contacted the border office and confirmed that the family had never left Hong Kong. As they continued their search, officers found a bloody shirt in the next room and a bloody plastic water pipe in the corner of the room. Police deployed sniffer dogs to collect more evidence and were able to locate the missing family. The dogs picked up a scent, leading them to bloodstains found under the freshly dug soil. In addition, despite it being summer vacation, the couple's two children, Hiu Man and Hiu Wing, had enrolled in summer school, indicating that the family was not on vacation. A special task force was therefore set up to investigate the case. Police sealed off the scene and blocked the entrances to Pingqi village to outsiders while placing Su Xingqi under house arrest as the prime suspect. Su quickly confessed to the police. He revealed that he was from Huangpu in Guangdong province and usually lived with his sister, wife, and 2 sons, aged 15 and 16. He used to support himself by selling motorcycles in Junction City, but in 2006, Guangdong imposed a motorcycle ban, which led to a decline in sales. Faced with financial difficulties, he contacted Xing Fai in Hong Kong to seek help in finding a job in the city. Xing Fai helped Su get a construction job that paid 500 Hong Kong dollars a day, including food and accommodation. However, after working for 2 weeks, Su was unhappy because after deductions, he only received 220 Hong Kong dollars. Frustrated, he quit the job without notice and returned to China. In 2007, after Typhoon Pabuk severely damaged his house, Su returned to Hong Kong because the repair costs were too expensive. He asked Xing Fai to help him find another job in Hong Kong. When Xing Fai couldn't find another job, Su Xingqi offered to repair the house, do gardening, and do housework around Xing Fai's house. And Xing Fai would pay Su. Xing Fai agreed to the deal, so every 2 months, Su would come to Hong Kong to help with housework, mainly gardening and repairing the house. During this time, Su began to notice Helen Tong Yen, who was later discovered by Xing Fai. On July 3rd, Su arrived in Hong Kong. 2 days later, on July 5th, Xing Fai took Su to visit his mother at the nursing home. After the visit, Su sneaked out to go home first to harass Helen Tong Yen. However, Xing Fai came home earlier than expected and caught him. Enraged, Xing Fai rushed at Su. In a panic, Su grabbed a 25-centimeter-long fruit knife and stabbed Xing Fai, causing him to collapse in a pool of blood and die. Horrified by what he had just done, Su considered calling the police. However, he did not. Su then thought of a way to silence Xing Fai's wife, Helen Tong Yen, and prevent her from calling the police. Su grabbed some wire from the corner of the room and rushed towards her, knocking her to the ground and tying her hands behind her back. He then covered her mouth and nose with tape and put a plastic bag over her head. Meanwhile, the couple's 2 children were in the bedroom watching cartoons. Helen Tong Yen shouted for them to run away, but instead they ran towards her and found their father dead and Su attacking their mother. In fear, they ran back to their room, crying and locking the door. Since she was tied up, Su left Helen Tong Yen behind and chased after the children. Hearing the noise, Hiu Man and Hiu Ying saw Su holding a pair of pliers. He pried open the door and used more electric wires to attack both of them. He tied their hands behind their backs, taped their mouths and noses, and put plastic bags over their heads. After leaving the bedroom, he returned to find that both children had stopped breathing. Hiu Man and Hiu Ying suffocated shortly after. After killing the entire family, Su was at a loss for what to do next. He returned home to think things over. He felt that hiding the bodies in a ditch or pond would be too easy to discover, and that dismembering them would be tiring and time-consuming. Instead, he decided to bury the bodies in their own home. On July 6th, he returned home to clean up as much blood as possible. He then dug a hole deep and wide enough to fit the bodies of the 4 family members and quickly placed them inside. He also threw the murder weapon into the hole before filling it up. Although he was skeptical of his motives, the police accepted the rest of his testimony. They took Su back to the house, where he pointed out where a sharp knife, a water pipe, a pair of pliers, and other tools used in the crime were. The fire department was called to assist in exhuming the buried body. Firefighters arrived equipped with digging tools and gas masks, as the bodies were buried near a septic tank. They began digging but soon encountered a significant obstacle: they hit cement. Sue had left out a crucial detail in his confession: pouring cement before covering it up. The firefighters could not determine the thickness of the cement, and since the cement had hardened, their tools were ineffective. The police then hired a private engineering company, which brought in specialized equipment to drill through the concrete slab. When the team drilled into the hole and discovered human hair, they panicked and refused to continue, fearing that they might reach the body. It took the police 13 hours to persuade them to continue. After digging, the hole was 2.54 meters wide and 6 feet deep. They finally discovered the bodies of a family, all barefoot and wearing only t-shirts and shorts. At the bottom was Xing Fei's body, his hands and feet tied with electric wire, with multiple stab wounds to his stomach, back, and neck, and his clothes soaked in blood. Human and Huing's mouths and noses were taped, their hands and feet were tied, and the children's faces looked distorted. Helen Tong Yan's condition was similar: her face was distorted, her hands and feet were tied, her mouth and nose were covered, and her eyes were covered with transparent tape. Su Xingqi was arrested, and during interrogation, he admitted that he had flirted with a woman. She felt uncomfortable and informed Xing Fei about the incident. Xing Fei becomes angry and kicks Su out of their home, forbidding him from returning. On July 3rd, Su returned home to start work, and his relationship with his cousin seemed to have improved. However, on July 4th, he again behaved inappropriately towards Helen Tong Yan. While Xing Fei was away, Su attempted to molest her. She escaped and locked herself in her room while calling for help. Not wanting to attract the attention of the neighbors, Su angrily left the house. On July 5th, Su and Xing Fei went to the nursing home, but he left first. Anticipating this, Xing Fei returned home early and found Su at his home and was trying to get in to talk to Helen Tong Yan. An argument ensued, and in the heat of the moment, Su stabbed Xing Fei. The rest of his confession was consistent with his initial statement but added the detail that he had filled the makeshift grave with cement. However, after the bodies were sent for autopsy, it became clear that Su's testimony was false. Xing Fei's murder was much more brutal than Su had claimed. Xing Fei had been stabbed 9 times in the head and neck, nearly 80 times in the body, and 10 times in the arms and legs. Instead of being suffocated with a plastic bag, he had been strangled. Forensic investigations showed that the cutlery and dishes in the house did not contain the family's DNA, but did contain Su's DNA. The weapon Su used was not a family kitchen knife, but a knife he owned. Furthermore, the cement used to bury the body had been purchased before the murder, suggesting that the crime was premeditated. Police discovered that bank cards had been used at ATMs after the time of death, but could not be withdrawn due to repeated incorrect PIN entries. In addition, the victim's cash and bank cards were missing, suggesting robbery as the motive behind the crime. Whenever the police pointed out inconsistencies in Su's testimony, he would quickly come up with another explanation. He claimed that his ancestral home in China needed urgent repairs while his 2 children were in school and he needed $100,000 in cash to pay for it. During his visits to Hong Kong, he did not earn much money, which prompted him to seek help from Xing Fei. Su believed that Xing Fei was actually rich but acted like a miser, and he thought that the low wages he received while working for Xing Fei were because they were exploiting him as cheap labor. On July 3rd, Su returned to Hong Kong alone without informing anyone. He waits until July 5th, when Xing Fei has a day off from work. While Xing Fei is at the nursing home, Su, armed with a hidden knife, knocks on his door. When Xing Fei returns and finds Su there, he invites him to cook something while they talk. As soon as Su enters the kitchen, he suddenly asks to borrow 100,000 Hong Kong dollars. Xing Fai refuses and explains to Su that the money was for his mother's medical treatment and his children's education. Su does not want to accept this answer and accuses Xing Fai of just wanting to use him as cheap labor. This accusation angers Xing Fai, and when Su continues to press the issue, Xing Fai tells him to leave. As Xing Fai turns to leave, Su lunges at him, covering his mouth before stabbing him in the back. He then threatened Hiu Man and Hiu Ying, ransacked the house for cash and bank cards, and demanded the card passwords. Xing Fai pretended to provide a fake password, which Su did not realize was invalid at the time. Su also lied about strangling the others and claimed that he killed them by covering their mouths and noses with tape and putting plastic bags over their heads. When Su went to the nearest ATM, he discovered that he had been scammed because his PIN did not work. When he returned home, he discovered that people had suffocated while he was away. Seeing the food he had prepared, he decided to sit and eat next to the 4 corpses while thinking of what to do with them. After stealing 6,000 Hong Kong dollars from Xing Fai, he buried the corpses and the tools he used in a small hole before going to sleep at his stone house. The next morning, Su realized that the smell from the buried corpses might give them away. To prevent this, he went to buy cement, dug up the hole, poured cement in it, and covered it up. He decided to stay at home for a while to answer any calls to Xing Fai's cell phone or home phone, telling anyone who asked that he was keeping an eye on things while they were away on vacation. Su did not expect the deception to be discovered so quickly. Even then, he continued to lie about several details, including how he had purchased cement before the incident and the circumstances surrounding the victims' deaths. At that point, the police were no longer focused on obtaining a true confession, believing they had enough evidence to proceed. The trial took place in the Hong Kong High Court on October 28, 2010, where he pleaded not guilty. He claimed that his previous statement about having an affair with Helen Tong Yen was correct, asserting that he killed her in self-defense and that the deaths of Hiu Man and Hiu Ying were accidental. On November 23, the jury returned a verdict in which Su Xingqi was sentenced to life imprisonment for 3 counts of murder and 1 count of manslaughter. The judge declared that Su Xingqi had no conscience, was worse than an animal, and had no remorse. He accused Su of fabricating his self-defense testimony and his relationship with Helen Tong Yen, not to receive a lighter sentence, but simply to tarnish their reputations after death. Su Xingqi's family from Hong Kong defended him against Xing Fai's accusations, claiming that Xing Fai was a hypocrite and a real villain, using Su as cheap labor and taking a portion of his wages. This defense angered neighbors and residents of Ping Chi village, forcing Su's family to return to China to escape the negative backlash. The crime itself was one of the most shocking in Hong Kong's history. Tam Xing Fai's family received a significant outpouring of support, with many people visiting to offer their condolences and netizens donating enough money to pay for the funeral. In addition, the family's 9 stray dogs were adopted by another family and taken for a walk every July 5 near their old home. On August 9, 2022, Su Xingqi died of liver cancer at the age of 55 in Stanley Prison, Hong Kong. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of McDonald family. Jeffrey McDonald was born on October 12, 1943, in New York, USA. He was a well-known figure in his youth, serving as the quarterback for his high school football team and being very popular among his peers. After graduating from Princeton, Jeffrey attended medical school and completed an internship at a prestigious medical center in New York. He married Colette Stevenson, a high school acquaintance. Shortly after their wedding, they welcomed their daughter Kimberly, and 3 years later, their son Kristen was born. After completing his education, Jeffrey joined the Army and was later accepted into the elite Green Berets. In the next 2 years, Jeffrey was assigned to the Fort Bragg military base in North Carolina. After a period of frequent relocations, their life finally became stable. They settled in the nearby city of Fayetteville and lived in a house provided by the state. Jeffrey returned home from work at 6 p.m. and no longer had to go on business trips, which allowed Colette to feel more at ease. She hoped that once Jeffrey completed his service in a few years, they could move to their own farmhouse, away from the city's hustle and bustle. At the time of the tragedy, Colette was pregnant with their third child, and everything seemed perfect. Their love story tragically turned into one of the most horrific crime episodes in U.S. history. At approximately 3:30 a.m. on February 17, 1970, the operator of the Fayetteville Rescue Service received a call from a man identifying himself as Captain Jeffrey McDonald. He reported that a violent attack had taken place in his home, stating that his wife had been stabbed to death and possibly raped. He was unclear about the fate of his children and urged for immediate assistance. The dispatcher quickly dispatched a police car to the scene. As the police were heading to the house, they saw a strange woman standing in the rain at 3:55 a.m., wearing a wide-brimmed hat. She was doing nothing and appeared to be waiting for something. However, the officers didn't have time to investigate further, so they drove past her. A few minutes later, they arrived at the Jeffrey family home, where the police entered through the back door because the lights inside were off. In the first room, officers discovered the body of a woman lying on the floor, showing no signs of life. She was covered in blood, and her position suggested she may have been raped. Her face was severely disfigured. She lay on her back next to her injured husband. As the first officer approached, Jeffrey urgently inquired about the fate of his children, whom he had heard screaming but could not get to. Another police officer searched the other rooms and found a brutal scene in the children's bedroom, where they discovered the mutilated head of 5-year-old Kimberly, with her neck and upper body also bearing multiple stab wounds. In another room, 2-year-old Kristen lay on the bed, suffering from multiple injuries to his back and chest. Jeffrey was in serious condition, having been stabbed in the head and upper chest. At one point, he lost consciousness, but a police officer was able to revive him to gather information about the incident. Jeffrey reported that 3 men and 1 woman had broken into the house. He suspected they were hippies, noting that one of the men was dark-skinned and wore a jacket with a sergeant's insignia. He also described a suspicious woman in a hat whom the police had encountered earlier, but unfortunately, it was too late to find her that night. Jeffrey was the only survivor of the attack that night, while the others sadly did not make it. He received first aid to treat his wounds, including a serious lung injury, and was given a sedative. Once stabilized, police spoke with him about the incident. He recounted that he and his wife had shared a glass of orange juice mixed with alcohol that evening. Since their daughter was sleeping, he decided to sleep on the couch in the living room. Jeffrey falls asleep in front of the TV but suddenly wakes up to intense pain. He is being attacked by 3 unidentified assailants. A woman in a hat stands to one side, holding a flashlight or candle, watching the attack. Jeffrey thinks the attackers look like hippies on drugs. The woman gives orders to the men. Chaos then erupts, and Jeffrey loses consciousness. When he regains consciousness, he finds his wife unresponsive. He tries to give her first aid, but to no avail. Desperate to get to his children, he finds himself unable to move due to his injuries, so he calls 911. The Army Criminal Investigation Department sent the most inexperienced police staff to the scene. After examining the area, he concluded that Jeffrey's story was not true. The officer found the story of Jeffrey, with the hippies, unlikely. He found no evidence that others were present. After this decision, the investigation shifted its focus to proving Jeffrey's guilt. The head of the McDonald family was arrested and Jeffrey was charged with 3 counts of criminal conspiracy. The case quickly turned into a disaster. From the outset, Jeffrey's defense attorneys aimed to assess the professionalism of the police during the search of the house. Through cross-examination, it was discovered that numerous violations had occurred. The procedures used had compromised the integrity of the evidence and the crime scene. The area had been essentially trampled, making it extremely difficult to identify any traces left by the criminals. This situation allowed the defense to argue that the prosecution's conclusion about Jeffrey's involvement in the crimes was incorrect, and that the killers were strangers, hippies. Jeffrey was a devoted family man, a caring father and husband, and a respected professional. As a result, he had many supporters, including colleagues who believed in his innocence. They felt there was no motive for the murder and found it hard to believe he would harm himself just to fake a near-death experience. His grandfather, Freddie Cassap, was so upset that he started a nationwide campaign to prove Jeffrey's innocence. Meanwhile, an article criticized the military justice system for holding closed hearings that excluded the public and the media. The situation did not improve. The trial remained hidden from public view, with more evidence later presented to the Supreme Court highlighting police incompetence. The investigation was sloppy. The ambulance driver tampered with evidence at the scene and even stole Jeffrey's wallet while police were present. An army doctor compromised crucial evidence, including hair samples needed for comparison. Fingerprints were mixed up with various items such as a phone and a baby bottle. Most of the people involved in the investigation were inexperienced and unprofessional. The number of violations identified continued to grow with each minute of questioning. The investigation received an unexpected tip about a young woman seen on the street in the rain, wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Her name was Helena Stokely. Helena was the daughter of a retired Army officer and had a troubled connection with the criminal world. While she was a police informant, she was also deeply involved in the hippie culture and had been selling illegal substances for many years. The police interviewed Helena and obtained valuable information about her associates. However, serious mistakes occurred during the interrogation. Notably, the police failed to record the conversation, which was necessary for presenting evidence in court. The inexperienced police claimed that the investigation into Helena's involvement was still ongoing. However, the situation worsened so much that the police simply did not know where she was. She fled when everyone realized the full scale of the incompetence that was committed during the Army investigation. The investigation must start all over again on all issues. Despite this, the military leadership still kept the hearing closed to the media. Meanwhile, one police officer chose to share information with journalists about the mistakes made by the Army Commission of the Armed Forces. This angered the military leadership even more. While everyone else believed he was innocent, the military commission refused to acknowledge their own incompetence. Unfortunately, they held significant power and were unwilling to back down. They asserted that, although there was no clear motive for the crime, Jeffrey might have used substances that could provoke aggression and potentially lead to murder. Contrary to the prosecution's allegations, witnesses began to testify that Jeffrey was a loving husband and father. The defense presented a large body of evidence in support of this view. Furthermore, at the time of the massacre, Jeffrey was in a stable mental state. Only a small amount of alcohol was found in his system, which would not have significantly impaired his judgment or led him to commit such violent acts. Along with friends and family who testified, qualified experts, including a psychiatrist, evaluated Jeffrey and concluded that he was sane and had no homicidal tendencies toward his family. Even the civil police believed that Jeffrey was innocent due to the lack of evidence against him. His mother had to sell their house to afford legal fees. Ultimately, he was cleared of charges due to insufficient evidence. However, this did not stop the Army Commission from reopening the investigation later on. The military police promised to persist in their efforts to convict Captain Jeffrey MacDonald, regardless of the previous investigation's flaws. They believed that their earlier mistakes did not rule out the possibility of Jeffrey's guilt. The situation was not serious and did not significantly affect the outcome. Jeffrey resigned from the U.S. Army. Disillusioned with the military, he began a campaign to expose the armed forces through the media. However, he was unaware of the powerful enemies he was facing and the dangers that would be placed upon him. Meanwhile, the police found Helena Stokely. She claimed to have witnessed the murder of the MacDonald family, allegedly committed by her friends. Helena was willing to testify in court, hoping to be granted immunity from prosecution. Her testimony was verified through a lie detector test. Despite this, the military leadership refused to consider any other suspects, focusing solely on Jeffrey and preparing to charge him again. In the summer of 1971, Jeffrey and a friend moved to Long Beach, California, in search of a fresh start. Initially not realizing that a conspiracy was brewing against him, they both found jobs in the emergency department of a medical center, where their efforts helped make it the best department in the entire facility. Jeffrey's skills were highly regarded, leading to his work being published in medical journals. He also became an advocate for children's rights, fighting against child abuse. The military prosecutor's office continued to reopen the case, and on the grounds that they had obtained Jeffrey's psychiatric reports, he was charged again. The trial was scheduled for mid-1979 and a smear campaign began. It was a high-profile case, and from the start, the armed forces were formed to fight Jeffries. And at that time, people from the highest echelons of power rallied against Jeffrey, a former Army captain. Assistant U.S. Attorney James Blackburn wanted to use the case as a springboard for his career. He was later convicted of forgery, fraud, and embezzlement. But at the time of the triple murder retrial, Jeffrey's reputation was impeccable. The assistant prosecutor had concealed evidence that proved Jeffrey's innocence. And the Attorney General was not even allowed to conduct his own independent examination of the evidence collected or review the case file. It was clear that the judge was biased toward the prosecution, which affected the outcome of the trial. Any evidence that could have proven that Jeffrey innocent was not presented to the jury or provided to Jeffrey's attorney. For example, the victim was found holding 5 strands of light-colored hair. The prosecution claimed that these hairs came from a doll owned by the victim's daughter. However, they actually belonged to Helena Stokely, who was wearing a light-colored wig that she removed shortly after the murder. Additionally, a hair belonging to Jeffrey was found in the victim's hand, but since he lived there, this was not unusual and could have been a coincidence. This evidence did not prove Jeffrey's guilt. The skin particles found under Kimberly and Kristen's fingernails were not their father's and were identified as belonging to the attackers. However, the particles were never analyzed and eventually disappeared. This evidence, along with much else that could have proven Jeffrey's innocence, was deliberately ignored at trial. A key part of the prosecution's case was the pajama fibers found on the chisel believed to have been used to kill Jeffrey's children. The prosecution claimed the chisel was the weapon used and contained particles from the clothing Jeffrey was wearing when police found him on the night of the triple murder. Years later, it was discovered that these claims were false. Police found several black fibers on the chisel that matched those found on the bodies of Kristen and Kimberly. However, these fibers did not match any of the clothing from the MacDonald's home. Additionally, wax droplets were found at the crime scene that did not match any of the candles from the victims' homes. These wax droplets were actually used by Helena Stokely in her rituals. Helena claimed to be a witch and practiced magic, which became a key factor in the case. The prosecution made a strong claim that fibers from Jeffrey's pajamas were found in Colette's hair. However, this claim was later proven to be false. The defense attorney, Jeffrey, was unable to object to this assertion at the hearing because it had never been mentioned before. There were also other false pieces of evidence, including claims of bloody marks on the couple's bed sheets, which the prosecution argued indicated that the husband had dragged his wife's body. It was later revealed that these bloody marks did not exist. Furthermore, the prosecution was unaware of important information at the hearing. Specifically, the prosecution was unaware that Helena Stokely had contacted the FBI in 1978, claiming that she was involved in a triple homicide while she was being treated for depression and had attempted to end her life in the hospital. During the trial, Helena said that on the day of the massacre, she was with her boyfriend Greg Mitchell and some soldiers from Fort Bragg. They were all using drugs, and according to her, they lost control. Helena mentioned that she called the McDonald family's house late at night to check if everyone was home, but she couldn't remember what happened afterward. The military police then approached her, and she felt so intimidated that during the second trial, she was unable to recount events between midnight and 5 a.m. However, she did acknowledge having a hat and a light wig, which were later destroyed because they could potentially serve as evidence against her. At trial, Helena claimed she had been present at the massacre, holding a candle and muttering strange incantations. However, she maintained that she had not harmed any of the McDonald family. She felt sick when her friends were near the children, prompting her to flee the house. It is thought that the murders were not random. Helena's friends may have been motivated by revenge. The soldiers were angry that Dr. Jeffrey had refused to give them illegal substances. Helena passed a polygraph test 3 times, and her statements were validated. Despite this, her testimony was deemed unreliable. The judge imposed restrictions on providing information about Helena and her soldier friends, which became one of the obstacles for Jeffrey's defense. The defense relied on the psychological profile and personal qualities of the accused to convince the jury of his inability to commit murder. The judge allowed the use of previously collected data, but only if Jeffrey underwent another examination by a psychiatrist. This request was of course a trap, as the psychiatrist had been cooperating with the military for 8 years while the investigation was ongoing. The prosecutor's office, eager to put Jeffrey behind bars for good, asked the doctor to make a finding. After a brief interrogation, the doctor declared Jeffrey a psychopathic murderer. Ultimately, the court refused to allow the use of Jeffrey's previous psychiatric records, which had been obtained from another psychiatrist. Instead, the jury was presented with the new psychiatrist's report, which had a devastating effect on the defense. The prosecution replaced Jeffrey's rosy image with that of a true monster. The jury found Jeffrey McDonald guilty of murdering his wife, Colette, and their 2 children, Kimberly and Kristen. Sentenced him to 3 life terms. Even with this, the revenge of the military police leadership was not over. After learning that Fort Bragg soldiers had a serious problem with illegal substances, the unit's leadership was unprepared for such problems, which coincided with the emergence of the burgeoning hippie movement. Under Jeffrey, the situation became more difficult for the soldiers to access, which made them unhappy. Later, some gathered to go to Jeffrey's house to take revenge. Helena's guilt was unquestionable. Even her husband, whom she married in the 80s, believed she was involved. He thought she hadn't committed murder but was likely a witness the incident. Helena shared many details about the crime scene that had never been made public at the time. The girl was present in McDonald's house on that fateful night, and this is well established. She underwent 3 polygraph tests, all supporting her account of being there. Her testimony was also recorded on video. According to her, when they entered the house, they forced Jeffrey to write a prescription for Zach, which led to a fight that resulted in the murder of Jeffrey's family members. Jeffrey was left alive, turned into a martyr. The criminals wrote "Death to all pigs" on the wall, likely trying to imitate Charles Manson, who was widely known at that time. Helena passed away at the age of 30 due to complications from liver disease. This incident occurred in 1970, and Helena's testimony was recorded with the judge's approval. At the time of the triple murder, her boyfriend, Greg Michel, was a soldier struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder after returning from Vietnam. As a result, he started using drugs heavily and had to enter treatment once more due to his addiction. He later admitted to a friend that he was involved in the MacDonald family's murder. At the crime scene, several pieces of evidence were collected, including Greg's blood and hair samples. It was noted that he was left-handed, and an independent expert determined that the knife wounds were likely made with the left hand. Additionally, he had liver issues, which prevented him from testifying during the trial. Jeffrey MacDonald's fatal mistake was befriending writer Joe McGinnis. They met just before his retrial, and Jeffrey asked Joe to write a book about his case. Jeffrey believed this would give him an advantage in the upcoming hearings. Jeffrey then allowed Joe to attend all of the meetings in detail. In return, Jeffrey received a portion of the book's advance from the publisher and agreed not to contest the book's contents. The friendship between the two men grew stronger. Joe supported Jeffrey and convinced him that Joe was still defending Jeffrey's innocence. However, Joe eventually betrayed Jeffrey by portraying him as the true monster in his book. From private conversations, Joe discovered that just before the triple murder, Jeffrey had taken diet pills, which were quite strong at that time. Although this was an isolated incident, Joe exaggerated the situation, suggesting that Jeffrey was taking 3 pills daily, which could have led to a serious overdose. Joe claimed this was the cause of Jeffrey's anger and violent behavior towards his family. He even pointed to a specific incident. Jeffrey's daughter had wet his side of the bed. In a normal family, the father would not react angrily to such an incident, but Joe saw it as the reason why Jeffrey, the man who was supposed to love his family, lost control. Joe believed that, under the influence of drugs, he had gone psychotic and ended up killing an entire family. However, a toxicology test found no drugs in Jeffrey's system, only a small amount of alcohol. During the trial, Joe said he had changed his mind about Jeffrey's guilt, believing it was more financially beneficial to Jeffrey. The controversial book did significant damage to Jeffrey's reputation. As a result, support for Jeffrey's innocence dwindled. However, Jeffrey successfully sued the book's author for libel. In August 1980, Jeffrey filed a lawsuit seeking millions in damages. After several hearings, the court awarded him $325,000. While most of the compensation was placed in a trust, Jeffrey retained the right to continue his fight for justice against the author. Jeffrey's story resonated with many people. Several well-known lawyers believed in his innocence and volunteered their services to help secure his acquittal. Despite their efforts, numerous appeals were rejected in 1989. However, during the trial and the review of the court's decision, new evidence emerged that supported Jeffrey's claim of non-involvement in the triple murder, including results from examinations. Unfortunately, the same judge presided over the proceedings. This judge continued to hinder the defense team, demonstrating a lack of impartiality throughout the case. A significant breakthrough during this time was the advent of new DNA testing technologies that allowed Jeffrey's defense team to conduct their own analyses. Sadly, at this stage, the judge repeatedly obstructed the lawyers' efforts to seek justice. Information about Helena Stokely finally emerged. A video of her testimony was made available to the lawyers. By this point, Jeffrey, the wrongfully convicted man, had spent 20 years in prison but had never stopped fighting for his freedom. Meanwhile, the military prosecutor's office continued to resist, attempting to dispute all the new evidence. Additional witnesses were found, some of whom had been intimidated and coerced into supporting the prosecution. Stokely, the MacDonald family's nanny, admitted to the prosecution that she had been at the MacDonald's home during the murders. She also revealed that the prosecution had threatened to prosecute her if she testified in court, which discouraged her from speaking out. Prosecutor Blackburn was eventually convicted of several charges, including forgery, theft, and embezzlement, and was remanded in custody in January 2006. New evidence came to light, suggesting a possible retrial. First, a videotaped confession by Helena Stokely was made public, followed by the release of evidence supporting Stokely's claim. DNA testing showed that hair and tissue found on the victim did not match anyone known and belonged to a stranger. In March 2006, a man came forward to the police, claiming that he had been drinking regularly at a bar with a man who had confessed to the MacDonald murders. This man turned out to be Lena's boyfriend, Greg Mitchell. The last time he had heard details of the case was a few weeks before Greg's death. The cashier at the store near the house, Jeffrey, claimed that he saw a group of hippies enter the store the morning after the murders. They looked unkempt, were covered in blood, and were talking to each other about the crime they had committed. However, they then threatened him with his life. The cashier recognized Greg and Helena among this group. An employee at the rehabilitation center where Greg Mitchell was treated also claimed that he had repeatedly confessed to her that he had killed the Jeffrey MacDonald's wife and children, even writing his initials on the wall of the center. Unfortunately, all of this evidence was ignored by the court. 54 years have passed since the tragic murder of the MacDonald family. Defenders at the Supreme Court are still trying to prove Jeffrey's innocence by filing appeals. His most recent appeal against his conviction was in 2021, but was dismissed. Jeffrey remains in prison but still holds out hope that he will one day be free again. While in prison, he met Catherine, an activist involved in the Innocence movement, and they developed a relationship. She visited him regularly and eventually married. Catherine runs a website dedicated to Jeffrey's case, working to secure his release. The 80-year-old, who has spent most of his life in prison, argues that those who actually committed the crime are still walking free. Many of those responsible have lived their entire lives without facing justice, and some have even died without being held accountable for their actions. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Kathy Lamb. Kathy Lamb lived in an affluent area of Palm Beach. Kathy had a challenging childhood. Her parents divorced when she was young, and she lived with her father. During her teenage years, her mother was absent, which took a significant emotional toll on her. She was self-conscious about her weight, feeling larger than her peers. Fortunately, her stepmother was kind and supportive. Recognizing Kathy's insecurities, she helped her build her confidence, and over time, Kathy became more confident. She started playing sports and trying to lose weight. Kathy was very smart and kind, which helped her make friends in high school. She was active and cheerful, and her problems seemed to disappear when she was with her friends. One of those friends was Jeff. They met when he was 17 and she was 16, and they quickly felt a special connection. Their relationship continued even after they graduated. 2 years later, they secretly married, surprising their families. When their parents found out, they thought the couple was too young to make such a serious decision, but the couple was determined to stay together, despite family pressure. It seemed like the newlyweds had a bright future ahead of them. Jeff worked hard at a local repossessed car park, while Kathy found work as a pharmacist at a pharmacy. She had the necessary education and wanted to advance in the field. Over the years, Jeff remained a tow truck driver, while Kathy became a top pharmacist. A year later, she was offered a job as a district planner for distributing drugs to pharmacies, an opportunity she eagerly accepted. They achieved their dream of owning a home and enjoyed 12 happy years there until a devastating tragedy occurred. On June 15, 2004, Jeff returned home from work at around 7 p.m. He intended to invite his wife to dinner. However, as soon as he entered, he was horrified to see blood all over the hallway, running down the walls. The gruesome evidence of blood splatter and brain matter terrified him. As he called 911, he struggled to speak and held back tears. Initially, the operator mistook his cries for those of a woman, but Jeff eventually plucked up the courage to describe his home, which now looked like the set of a horror movie. At the end of the corridor, there was a significant amount of blood on one wall, as if it had been splattered. Facing this wall, about 1.5 meters away, similar splatters were visible on the opposite wall, and they extended down the stairs leading to the second floor. On the upper level, in the midst of the gruesome scene, lay 30-year-old Kathy, who was unresponsive. The operator attempted to guide Jeff over the phone to provide first aid, but Kathy's injuries were so severe that there was nothing that could be done. When the police arrived, they were taken aback by the horrific sight. It was one of the most brutal crime scenes they had ever encountered. Kathy's body showed multiple severe head injuries from heavy objects. Her skull and face were so badly damaged that they appeared completely disfigured. Although the murder weapon was not found at the scene, a thorough laboratory analysis determined that it was likely a long, heavy object with a hexagonal shape or similar features. Jeff mentioned that he had tried to call his wife several times after 5 p.m. but received no answer, which he found unusual. Concerned, he rushed home to meet her. It turned out that not only Kathy was injured, the couple had 3 large dogs in the house, Jeff's dog and his wife's 2 dogs. Tragically, both of his wife's pets were discovered badly beaten and lying on the floor next to their deceased owner. They had suffered severe head injuries and were barely alive. Unfortunately, the injuries were so extensive that the veterinarians had to euthanize the dogs to relieve their suffering. In a shocking turn of events, Jeff's dog was found locked in his owner's bedroom. Paws from all 3 dogs were found at the scene, along with blood that police believe did not come from the animals. They suspect the blood may have come from a struggle with the killer. The blood has been sent for analysis to determine its source and whether it can help the investigation, and they await the results. Police are uncertain whether the blood on the dogs came from Kathy or whether they fought with the attacker to protect her, resulting in their fatal injuries. Police found the dogs unharmed after the woman had been killed and the fight had begun. The amount of blood on the animals suggests that they had seriously injured the attacker, possibly lacerating an arm or leg. This means that the attacker would have bled profusely, possibly from an open wound, and that he would have sought medical attention at a hospital. The attacker's intentions remain unclear. He may have acted recklessly or out of a deep hatred for his victim, ignoring the large dogs that lived with the family. After examining the crime scene, the police still lacked any concrete leads. They had to wait for the autopsy results to gather more information. In the meantime, they checked all the local hospitals for the injured attacker. Several suspicious people came in with injuries that were found to be unrelated to the incident, as their injuries did not match those of a dog bite. The police began talking to local residents in the hope that someone had seen suspicious activity at Kathy's home or had noticed the criminal fleeing, possibly injured. Unfortunately, no one observed anything unusual. They were also trying to find a motive. Robbery seemed unlikely given the many valuables in the family's home. Only the gold earrings with diamonds that the Kathy was wearing during the attack were missing, while everything else remained untouched. Even the money, which was clearly visible, was not taken. It seems unlikely that a robber would ignore such an opportunity. There were no indications of a break-in, the furniture was undisturbed, drawers were not opened, and belongings were not scattered about, as thieves typically do when they search for valuables. This led the police to explore alternative motives and various theories. The forensic expert determined that the murder occurred between 4:30 p.m. and 5 p.m. Jeff, the first suspect who found the scene, had a strong alibi. At that time, he was on the job and was seen by numerous co-workers. Additionally, he showed no signs of injuries that would typically result from a struggle with the dogs. Just as police were about to clear Jeff of suspicion, an unknown young woman arrived at the family home. Joy Steele came to the house and introduced herself as Jeff's fiancée, which surprised the police, especially since Jeff had been crying earlier. The police found this an interesting case, as a man who had just lost his wife was being comforted by his mistress, with whom he had been in a serious relationship for a long time. This revelation made the case seem even more suspicious. 7 years into their relationship, Kathy discovered Jeff's infidelity. Despite this, they remained together and did not divorce. Kathy forgave him and even encouraged him to end the affair, leading to their reconciliation and continued life together just before the tragic incident. Police are considering whether a love triangle may have been a motive for the crime. Jeff had a strong motive for killing his troubled wife. That doesn't necessarily mean Jeff killed Kathy himself. He may have convinced someone else to do it. The police discovered a third dog locked in one of the rooms, which was unharmed. This was peculiar, especially given the serious injuries of the other 2 dogs belonging to the Kathy. Did the criminal truly hate her to the extent that he chose to ruin everything she cherished? The police needed to find answers to these questions. In the meantime, one of the police was questioning Jeff's mistress, Joy Steele, at the location of the incident. Joy shared her and Jeff's future plans. They planned to move away after a while Jeff planned to quit his job. Joy had a solid alibi. Joy, who was apparently working at a restaurant during the time of the murder, was present, and multiple people could confirm this. In addition, Joy had no injuries on her body. Although the suspicious couple could not have been directly involved in the murder due to their alibis and their lack of injuries, the police have not ruled them out as suspects given the serious circumstances surrounding the crime. They had a strong motive for their plan. The investigation into the crime and the hiring of the killer continues, with the police focusing on identifying potential enemies or those who may have wanted to harm Kathy. However, Kathy's friends and relatives have been unable to identify any enemies, with the exception of her husband. That same day, another suspect emerged. Jeff had another mistress named Lisa. A few weeks before the murder, Lisa's husband, Ray, discovered them together when he came home early from work and found Jeff shirtless on the couch. This confrontation led Ray to kick Jeff out of the house. The next day, Ray calls Lisa and threatens to kill Jeff if he continues with Lisa. Ray emerged as a potential suspect due to his violent nature and apparent motive. However, the situation raised questions about the Kathy. Why did Ray kill Jeff's wife? She had not harmed him and was actually the victim in the scenario, just like Ray. Despite this, Jeff continued to blame Ray. He believed that Ray had gone to the house to carry out his threat against Jeff, but Jeff was not home at the time. It is also possible that upon arriving at Jeff's house, Ray was in danger from Jeff's wife and dogs, so Ray felt compelled to kill her and the dogs. However, this motive does not fit with the extreme violence the killers showed towards Kathy. Her injuries were extremely brutal, suggesting that this was not a random crime, but an act of deep hatred. The police then turned their attention to Lisa, the second lover. Despite her husband's threats, she remained in contact with Jeff. Cell phone records confirmed that they frequently called and texted each other, including at the time of the Kathy's murder. Lisa and her husband Ray were both investigated, but they had solid alibis and were eliminated as suspects. However, the police decided to track the geolocation data of the lovers' mobile devices to gain more details. The call between Lisa and Jeff took place just minutes after the murder. Jeff's cell phone was found near his home, and Jeff was not at work at the time, contrary to what he had previously said. Additionally, Jeff's dog was unharmed, which seems more than just a coincidence. Forensic experts conducted a thorough examination of the animals. They collected DNA samples from the dog's muzzle and paws. Notably, the stains found on Jeff's dog were identified as palm prints. Blood samples taken from the scene were confirmed to belong to the Kathy, indicating that the perpetrator was in the hall with the dog after the attack on Kathy, during which she was injured or possibly killed. police suspected that the killer's DNA might be on the animal's muzzles and paws. However, the investigation disproved this theory, revealing that the blood was not human, but believed to be from dogs that may have been fighting each other. By analyzing all the new information, police were able to piece together a clearer picture of the events that occurred on that tragic day. Someone entered the house and discovered Kathy along with her 3 large dogs. The attacker hit the woman in the head with a heavy object. 2 dogs were present, also seriously injured and later died. And they did not attack the attacker. They endured the blows without defending themselves. The 3rd dog also did not confront the attacker. Instead, the 3rd dog focused on protecting the other 2 dogs. This behavior aroused suspicion. The police consulted dog handlers for insights. Experts suggested that the dog's lack of resistance indicated they were familiar with the attacker and viewed him as a friend. This familiarity explained why they did not confront him but instead appeared to bite each other. Police found bite marks on the dogs, leading them to conclude that only Jeff, the owner of the surviving dog, could have attacked Kathy. Additionally, geolocation data indicated that the Jeff was near the house, which supported their suspicions. However, the Supreme Court only had circumstantial evidence, meaning they still had a long way to go before bringing any charges. The police needed one crucial piece of information to strengthen their case. With no further clues, the police focused on investigating Jeff's personal life to understand what might have motivated Jeff to kill his wife. It turned out that the family had recently faced significant financial difficulties, which had affected Jeff for many years before these events. Jeff's boss caught him stealing a large sum of money, about $30,000. Jeff had not spent it all and agreed to return it. He also paid his boss $20,000 in restitution. The police then analyzed Jeff's activities. It turned out that his job brought in only a small income, just enough for his family's needs. He also spent money on his mistress. His wife's income was much higher, but he did not want to tell her about his problems. Jeff was characterized as someone without any remarkable business skills. He was neither particularly foolish nor exceptionally intelligent. His earnings were limited, making the compensation amount a serious financial burden for him. Despite living in an affluent neighborhood, he struggled to come up with the funds. Jeff sought ways to earn extra money or secure a loan, but all these efforts proved fruitless, and the total amount of compensation remained far beyond his reach. He later learned that he was the sole beneficiary of Kathy's life insurance policy, which was worth $29,000. Police believed that this amount of money could solve all of Jeff's financial problems. On the day of the incident, police collected the clothes he was wearing at the time. However, forensic experts conducted a quick test and found no blood or DNA from Kathy on his clothes. The suspect was wearing dark clothing, making it difficult to detect any blood stains. The experts meticulously studied every millimeter of the items using a microscope with 60,000 times magnification. Inside the jeans, they discovered several small red drops, which the forensic team identified as blood. This blood had seeped deep into the fabric fibers, suggesting that it was from high-velocity splashes. This evidence was consistent with the nature of the injuries sustained by the Kathy. DNA testing confirmed that the blood belonged to Kathy. The police were further surprised when they examined the Jeff's other belongings. They found a gold earring embedded with a diamond in one of his trouser pockets, which he had claimed was stolen during an attack. This indicated that he likely staged the scene and hesitated to dispose of the item to avoid being caught at a pawn shop. To strengthen their case in court, the police needed to find the murder weapon. Despite their best efforts, the police were unable to find the weapon. It took the prosecutor's office 2 months to establish a clear connection between the killer and the victim. During this time, an employee of the company where Jeff worked discovered a hexagonal crowbar on the roof of the building. The tool was standard equipment on the company's tow trucks and was available to all employees. What made the crowbar suspicious was the significant amount of blood found on it. The employee promptly notified the police of the discovery. Jeff claimed that he had lost his crowbar and was unable to provide it to the police. This raised suspicions that the bloody crowbar belonged to him and may have been hidden as the murder weapon. The crowbar was sent to a laboratory, where experts compared it to the injuries found on Kathy's head. They concluded that the shape of the tool matched the impact marks. Additionally, the blood found on the crowbar was confirmed to be Kathy's through analysis. Jeff was arrested and charged with premeditated murder. Friends knew he had often complained about his troubled marriage. He claimed that Kathy couldn't manage household chores, which made him angry. However, he overlooked that she was the one supporting the family financially and covering their travel expenses, leaving her little time for housework. Jeff's car was always cluttered with garbage, yet he continued to blame Kathy. He frequently talked to friends about wanting to end their relationship, and several acquaintances reported that he was considering divorce. Kathy was unhappy in her marriage to Jeff due to his betrayals and chaotic lifestyle, which she knew about. She often vented her frustrations to friends but couldn't bring herself to leave him because she loved him deeply. Despite her unhappiness, she stayed with Jeff, trying to tolerate his behavior. For Jeff, murder seemed like a better option than going through a divorce. He was in dire financial straits after stealing $30,000 at work, which had severely impacted his finances. If he divorced Kathy, they would have to divide their assets, and he risked losing their home. He felt he had nothing left to lose, as a divorce would leave him with little since Kathy could claim most of their assets. Jeff figured that by committing murder, he could use the life insurance payout to pay off his debts, keeping part of the money to start a new life with his mistress. Jeff had promised to make a choice between his two girlfriends, Lisa and Joy, but the decision remained a secret. During the investigation, police uncovered more details about the crime. On the day it happened, Jeff left for work but had actually planned to kill his wife. He drove a tow truck to a gas station, pretending he needed to fill it up. His absence from work was noted, and during that time, he returned home to wait for his wife to return. He was familiar with her daily routine, so he did not have to wait long. In a shocking turn of events, Jeff brutally killed his wife's dogs with a crowbar. The dogs, confused and frightened, began to fight. To stop the chaos, Jeff hit each dog on the head and then took his pet, Netarunu, into a room and locked the door. After the incident, he removed his wife's diamond earrings, intending to make it look like a robbery. He discarded some of his clothes, taking off his shirt and shoes, but he kept the jeans he wore during the massacre, likely overlooking the bloodstains on them. This oversight allowed forensic experts to find tiny drops of blood on the jeans, linking him to the crime. His lover called him while he was near his home, which revealed his location on the phone. When he arrived at the station, he attempted to dispose of the crowbar used in the attack, but did so carelessly, simply throwing it onto the roof of a utility building and not washing it. He believed the tool would never be discovered. Jeff was convicted of premeditated murder due to financial difficulties he thought he could overcome by collecting life insurance from his wife's death. Prosecutors presented substantial evidence linking him to the crime scene, the murder weapon, and the victim. His fingerprints were found on the crowbar, along with Kathy's blood on his clothing. He had attempted to stage a robbery and failed to completely conceal the earrings that were believed to have been stolen. Several people testified about domestic problems. Kathy still hoped to reconcile with her husband, despite being devastated by his betrayal. She truly loved him and was undaunted by his financial difficulties. What she craved most was love and understanding. Unfortunately, Jeff did not want to rekindle their relationship. Instead, he planned a murder that he believed would net him $29,000. It is suspected that Joy, one of Jeff's lovers, knew of his intentions. Jeff promised her a future together, on the condition that she pay off the debt he would incur from his crimes. During the hearing, the defense attempted to portray Jeff as a model husband and a good person, but no witness could reliably substantiate this claim. Jeff had never been a hard worker and showed little interest in his work. He had no motivation to do anything else and did not have a positive reputation in his family life. He was not a good husband, as he had a history of infidelity that his late wife knew about. His lifestyle was well known to friends and family. But it was his wife who suffered the most. When Jeff's efforts to build a better image failed, his attorney changed tactics. He began looking for weaknesses in the prosecution's case. However, the prosecution's strategy was well rehearsed and backed by substantial evidence, leaving little room for debate. The defense argued that Jeff was not the only possible suspect in Kathy's murder, claiming that the police had focused too quickly on him without fully exploring other potential suspects. In fact, police and the prosecutor's office had interviewed dozens of people and considered multiple suspects. Each suspect was thoroughly questioned, allowing police to eliminate those who did not fit the evidence. The prosecution argued that the attacker had two motives. First, he hoped to solve his financial problems through a life insurance policy. Second, he wanted to get rid of his troubled wife so he could live with one of his mistresses. Additionally, he sought to avoid the risk of losing his assets or having to divide his assets in a divorce. The prosecution also argued that Jeff's mistress, Lisa, knew about his plans. She supported him and was waiting for the call to hear about the progress of the crime. Her indiscretion led her to call Jeff, which provided the police with a vital clue. Investigations were conducted to determine whether the mistresses were involved in planning or organizing the crime, but the results were negative. However, it is clear that they supported the Jeff, even though they should have reported his bad intentions to the police to prevent the murder. Ultimately, no evidence was found to prove the lovers' guilt or involvement, so they faced no consequences in court. In September 2006, Jeff Lamb was convicted of premeditated murder and sentenced to life without parole. As the verdict was read, Lisa wept uncontrollably in court. Kathy's family believes the court's ruling was fair. In Kathy's mother's opinion, Jeff should rot behind bars for the rest of his life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Solomon family. Angela grew up in a religious family in Nashville, USA. She was talented in singing and excelled academically. Then, she earned a doctorate in pharmacy and was successful in her career, which allowed her to earn a good income. She bought a house and lived a fulfilling life. In 2001, she reconnected with Aaron Solomon, a charismatic guy she had known since school. He was a sports presenter on a TV channel and made a good impression on her. The couple started dating, and just a few months later, Angela became pregnant with a son. In 2002, their first child was born, named Grant. Immediately after that, Aaron proposed to Angela, but their relationship was complicated, and she was unsure about marriage. She initially planned to raise the child on her own. However, her religious family pressured her to marry, and she eventually agreed. Aaron turned out to be a caring father and loving husband. And their relationship improved. For years after their wedding, in October 2006, they welcomed a daughter named Gracie. Grant, who was 4 years old at the time, was thrilled to have a younger sister. He stayed by her crib and helped his mother with her care. Then, he began playing baseball and became a successful player on his school team, gaining popularity among his peers. After the birth of Gracie, the parents' relationship worsened. Aaron was a controlling and possessive man who insulted his wife and children while having multiple affairs. He used his status as a presenter to start many affairs. In 2013, 7 years old, Gracie told her mother that her father was bothering her during bath time. It was discovered that Aaron had prohibited his wife from bathing their daughter, insisting on doing it himself, and even filmed his daughter without clothes. Angela forbade Aaron from bathing or touching their daughter. Although he admitted to his actions, he threatened Angela, warning that he would take their children away if Angela told anyone. As an active church member, he demanded complete obedience from his family, so Angela felt compelled to remain silent. Angela finds out that Aaron has cheated on many other girls and learned he was molesting minors. In 2014, explicit photos of minors were found on his phone, but the incident was covered up and he lost his job. However, then he found a new job as a financial consultant at a large bank. The couple began to argue more often. Angela wanted a divorce, but Aaron refused and suggested they see a family psychologist. Angela agreed, and during therapy, it was revealed that she had been dealing with victim syndrome throughout her life. Her parents had been harsh, imposing their religious beliefs on her, and she had entered an unfortunate marriage with Aaron, who was narcissistic and struggled with sexual addiction. The sessions didn't help with their family problems. Angela found another psychologist she trusted and shared all the details of her life and family issues. She started considering a plan to leave Aaron, who was controlling and wouldn't let her go. She kept notes on her phone and communicated with the psychologist via email. However, Aaron was secretly listening to her therapy sessions, checking her phone and email, and was aware of all her plans. She complained to her parents about Aaron's troubling behavior, but they didn't support her. They sided with he, believing, due to their faith, that a woman should endure her husband's behavior and keep the household intact. She felt unsupported by everyone. Aaron's behavior deteriorated, and he started to become violent towards his wife and children. The children, wanting to protect their mother, they began sleeping in the same room out of fear of their father. One day, Aaron attacked Angela in the bathroom, attempting to strangle her with a hairdryer cord. She was ready to say goodbye to life when her 11-year-old son, Grant, intervened and managed to stop his father. Terrified, she and the children chose not to tell anyone about the incident and did not report Aaron to the police. However, he called 911, falsely claiming that she had tried to end your life using the cord. She was then hospitalized for psychiatric evaluation, despite asserting that she was mentally sound. Eventually, doctors reassured her that she was indeed healthy. Angela's psychotherapist learned about her situation and shared their correspondence, explaining that Angela was a victim of domestic violence. Angela was discharged from the hospital on May 11, 2013, and was advised to obtain a restraining order against her husband. Medical records confirmed she was not depressed, had no end-your-life thoughts, no history of mental health issues. However, she was indeed a victim of domestic violence and was in a dangerous situation. After her release, Angela was determined to secure a restraining order against her husband and file for divorce. Upon returning home, she found the house empty. She attempted to contact Aaron, but he did not respond. She also tried calling her own parents and his parents, but received no answer. Her relatives dismissed her as mentally ill and ignored her. The next day, May 12, was Mother's Day. Angela hoped Aaron would bring the children to visit her, but instead, the police arrived at her house. He had falsely reported to 911 that she was attempting to end your life. The police checked on her, but they found no cause for concern and left. Time passed, and Angela received a restraining order but still did not know where the children were. She contacted the police several times, asking them to locate the children, but they refused to take her statement because the children were with their father, Darren, who had the legal right to have them. He had not kidnapped them. She soon discovered that he had filed for divorce first and had obtained a restraining order against her. He claimed she was a danger to him and the children. Divorce proceedings began, and both his parents and her parents spoke against her. As a result, he was granted full custody of the children, and the court ordered she to pay child support. The children were not present in court and were not asked with whom they wanted to stay. The judge noted that she had been in a mental hospital, which was enough to deny her custody claims. She couldn't do anything about her children. Angela continued to live with her father and fought hard to challenge the guardianship, arguing that the children were not well with Aaron. A retrial for the guardianship case was scheduled. He hired top lawyers for the case, having recently received a large inheritance from a wealthy aunt who had passed away. During the trial, Angela's relatives once again testified against her, alleging she was intent to end her life. However, this time, psychotherapists and staff from the psychiatric hospital defended her. They confidently stated that she was a victim of Aaron's abusive behavior and had never attempted to end her life. Her injuries were inflicted by her husband. Despite this, the judge ignored their testimony and awarded full custody to Aaron. Angela did not give up and repeatedly challenged the custody decision, eventually securing the right to see her children for 2 hours a week. When she finally saw them, she was shocked by their condition. Both Grant and Gracie had lost weight, and Gracie had severe bruises under her eyes. Aaron disciplined them harshly, using physical violence, enforcing a strict diet, and banning unhealthy and sweet foods. Grant once jumped out of a moving car to escape from his father and was injured. The children were told by their father that their mother, Angela, was dead when she was actually placed in a mental hospital. He also said it was unsafe there, so they needed to move. The children believed their father at the time because they saw their mother in a bad state after being strangled and felt hopeless, thinking no one could help them. Angela fought to gain full custody of the children, which required her to undergo a psychiatric examination to prove her mental health. She passed the examination successfully. In 2014, the court increased Angela's child visitation rights to 6 hours per week, but kept the children with their father. She continued her legal battle. In early 2015, Angela received devastating news. Aaron had been raping 9-year-old Gracie for several months. The frightened girl felt she couldn't tell anyone. She described feeling sleepy and falling asleep after eating. Then she wake up in her father's bed with severe pain in her crotch and bruises on her thighs. She didn't know how the bruises got there. Her father, Aaron, claimed it was a rash from her bathing suit, but she knew that wasn't true. He never took them to the doctor, fearing exposure, even when they were very sick. Gracie recounted how Aaron beat them, drove recklessly to scare them, and neglected their basic needs. Angela was horrified by this information and tried to use it to gain custody of the children from Aaron, their abusive father, awaiting a new trial. In April 2015, Aaron filed a complaint against Angela for not paying child support, leading to her arrest. She argued that Aaron was not properly caring for the children and was using the child support money for himself and his lovers, despite having inherited wealth. Angela was later released and continued to pay child support. She fought for her children for several more years, reporting Aaron to law enforcement, contacting his church, and warning the church school about the danger he posed. However, no one took her seriously, and everyone thought she was crazy. In 2018, Grant and Gracie ran away from home. Aaron immediately contacted the police, and the children were found quickly. When they returned, Aaron punished them harshly. Angela, upon discovering this, requested an emergency custody hearing due to Aaron's abusive behavior. On August 17, 2018, during Grant's baseball tournament, Aaron and Gracie came to watch the match. After the match, Aaron took Gracie with him, while Grant stayed at the sports camp. Aaron rented a hotel room with only one bed for the night. Despite 12-year-old Gracie's request for a room with 2 beds, Aaron raped her that night. The following day, on August 18th, an emergency custody hearing took place. Gracie disclosed what her father had done, but Aaron's lawyer denied the allegations, suggesting that Gracie imagined the incident and arguing that Aaron, being a loving father, couldn't have committed such an act. Later, Grant testified that his father was abusive, beat him, fed him poorly, humiliated him, and forced him to train all day. Both children expressed their desire to live with their mother, not their father. However, the judge did not believe them. He concluded that Angela and the children were lying to damage Aaron's reputation because Aaron attended the same Grace Church as the judge and a senator, where he was well regarded. This was a closed, deeply religious community. Aaron attended church every Sunday, never missing an event, and was well regarded by the community's elite. People couldn't believe that Aaron was capable of such monstrous behavior. And there is no evidence that he abused the children. The judge dismissed Angela's request for custody. During the trial, Gracie clung to her mother and was reluctant to leave with her father. However, when her father threatened to call the police, she had no choice but to go with him. The mother lost custody rights, but the children were unable to stay with their father either. Gracie and Grant sought help from school staff, a psychologist, and the church, sharing the terrible things their father had done to them. However, the principal called them in and urged them to remain silent to protect both their and their father's reputations. Despite their efforts to explain why they didn't want to return home, the principal dismissed their claims, saying he had heard it all before and didn't believe them. He contacted their father, who then removed them from school. Nobody believed the children, as everyone thought Angela had coerced them into falsely accusing their father. One day, Gracie and Grant couldn't take it anymore and ran to their mother, Angela. Then, Aaron came to look for them and asked them to return. Grant and Gracie refused, and he allowed them to live temporarily with their mother. With the help of therapy, they set boundaries, and their father began to respect them. Grant and Gracie sometimes had to live with their father, as he still had more custody rights, but most of the time they lived with their mother. During those times, they were happy, and the relationship with their father became more tense and reached its peak. On July 20, 2020, 18-year-old Grant was driving to his training, which was about an hour away from Angela's house. Upon arriving at the parking lot, a tragic accident occurred in which Grant lost his life. His father, Aaron, who was also at the training, witnessed the incident. He immediately called 911 for help for his son. Aaron later recounted the event. Aaron explained that he had exited his pickup truck to retrieve his gear from the back. While standing in the parking lot near the building, he was focused on his phone and did not notice the pickup rolling backwards. The vehicle hit him, dragging him several meters before it went down a deep ditch. Aaron, who was there with 3 others, saw everything unfold. When the police arrived, they found Grant lying on his back beneath the front of a car, but the tires were not touching him. Blood was streaming from his nose and ears. Using a jack, they managed to lift the car and pulled him out. He was still breathing, so they performed CPR and rushed him to the hospital. Unfortunately, despite their efforts, Grant, who was in serious condition, died on the way without regaining consciousness. Although he had multiple injuries, but the official cause of death was cardiac arrest. Strangely, Aaron accompanied him to the hospital and signed papers preventing an autopsy and organ donation. When Angela learned about the incident, she hurried to the hospital and requested an autopsy, but her pleas were ignored. The police classified the case as an accident and didn't pursue further investigation. Angela believed Aaron's account of the incident was false, pointing to various inconsistencies. Grant's injuries didn't match those of someone trapped under a car. He had no typical crushing injuries. The hospital recorded just 1 head injury and 3 bruises, on his jaw, left hip, and right hip. Aaron claimed Grant drove a pickup for about an hour to reach his training, yet there were no burn marks from a hot car, nor were there abrasions from being dragged on asphalt. At the scene of the tragedy, there was no blood, and Grant's shoes were completely clean, which contradicted Aaron's story. The grass near the car's exit and the path where the body was dragged were untouched. There weren't even tire tracks where they should have been. Instead, they were found on the other side of the sidewalk. Grant's glasses were discovered there too. He always wore his glasses because he had poor vision without them, shown in all his photos. So, how did his glasses end up on the sidewalk if he wasn't there? He was in the parking lot. Why didn't his glasses fall there when the car allegedly ran over him? According to Aaron, Grant had his back to the car and didn't see it coming when it moved in reverse. Strangely, Grant was found lying on his back under the car but in the opposite direction. How could his body have turned 180 degrees under the car? It seems impossible. Furthermore, how could the car back into the ditch and then get back up and out of the ditch? It was hard to believe. None of the people in the nearby buildings heard Grant's screams, which should have been heard during such an accident. Everything happened quietly, so no one saw or heard anything. There were no CCTV cameras, and the three guys Aaron mentioned on the call were not there either. Strangely, Aaron did not attempt to rescue his son from the car, even though Aaron was briefly with him. Aaron just watched as his son died. Grant never stored equipment in the back of the car. He always left his uniform on the back seat. The phone Aaron claimed Grant was using was never found. Although Grant always carried his phone with him and called his girlfriend every morning, he didn't call that day for some reason. There was no damage to the car. Even though the rear bumper of this car model is fragile and prone to breaking, it was intact. It would have been damaged in such a descent. There were no witnesses to this tragic accident. A man saw Aaron walking along the road shortly before the tragedy, in the parking lot. It's unclear what he was doing there, although Aaron claimed he arrived later. At his son's funeral, Aaron described his death as a divine act, leaving everyone surprised. People were shocked by Aaron's lack of emotion. He showed no grief for his son. Angela suspected that he may have hit their son with his car elsewhere and staged the accident by bringing their son to the location afterwards. There was confusion as to why the pickup truck unexpectedly rolled away, as it had been parked correctly and had no previous issues. It was speculated that the truck might have had a technical fault, and although Aaron initially suggested investigating it to sue the manufacturer for compensation, he eventually declined, which was out of character for him since he usually pursued financial gains. He continued to drive the truck without any concern for several months. Angela wanted to investigate the truck herself, but Aaron strongly opposed the idea and promptly sent the vehicle to the scrapyard. This was puzzling, as the truck was in excellent condition and could have been sold for a good price. Angela managed to locate the vehicle in spring 2021 and arranged for an independent examination. Experts concluded that the accident could not have occurred as Aaron had claimed. Angela then pushed for the investigation of the case, which had been closed, to be reopened. Grant had just turned 18, according to Angela, and he had always protected Gracie's from their abusive father. He warned his father that as soon as he turned 18, he would go to court. He and his sister Gracie planned to formally free themselves from their father's control, believing the court would take them more seriously as adults. In Angela's opinion, Aaron feared this and decided to stop his son. Gracie was devastated by the loss of her beloved brother, who could protect her. On May 12, 2021, Gracie, then 14, uploaded an 18-minute video on YouTube in which she described her father, Aaron, as a monster. She claimed that he attempted to kill their mother, raped her, and physically abused both her and Grant, eventually killing Grant's. Gracie fears that her father might harm her now that her brother is gone. They are defenseless, and their father started harassing them. Despite a restraining order, Aaron continued to stalk she and begged her to return home, but she refused. She was granted legal protection, but her father ignored it and kept following her from school. Due to the school principal's friendship with he from church, they refused to enforce the restraining order. After this interview, Aaron once again complained that Gracie was being negatively influenced and turned against him. He persuaded she that she imagined everything and that her mother had suggested the idea of rape. Aaron filed a defamation lawsuit against Angela, gathering people who refuted the information in the video Gracie recorded. He claimed Angela demanded he give up custody and threatened him. Angela was determined to seek justice. At the trial, Aaron withdrew the lawsuit but is considering refiling with a new legal team. Angela and her daughter Gracie are striving for justice for Grant. Gracie prefers to live with her mother and not see her father. They launched a website and gathered support from many people after Grant's death. However, the pastor, the school principal, and other individuals denied any involvement. One of Grant's classmates mentioned that she, along with Gracie, asked the school administration to intervene and protect them from Aaron, but the school dismissed their request, saying it was beyond their responsibility. In Tennessee, there is a law requiring anyone who suspects child abuse to report it to the Department of Children. However, no one reported anything in this case. After Grant's death, students were not allowed to discuss the tragedy at school. Later, the pastor left the church, causing a significant split within the congregation. Currently, Aaron has not been charged with any crimes related to Grant, and he denies all accusations against him. Aaron's supporters occasionally post on social media, accusing Gracie and Angela of lying and behaving unchristianly. Angela and Gracie live together but are afraid of Aaron. Gracie aspires to become an FBI agent to help people through investigations. The tragic story of the Solomon family leaves behind many painful and unforgettable lessons about domestic abuse and violence, as well as society's indifference to victims. Through this story, we clearly see the need to protect children and vulnerable family members from abusive acts. At the same time, the importance of support from the community and authorities is also emphasized. Let's speak up together and protect the vulnerable so that no family has to endure such pain again. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Katie Passaniti. Loretta had no interest in her child, Katie. Loretta was just 15 years old when her daughter was born. Right after the birth, Loretta abandoned her daughter, and the father's identity was unknown. Consequently, Katie's grandmother took her in and cared for her. They formed a strong bond, and Katie always thought of her grandmother as her mother. When Katie turned 15, her biological mother, Loretta, re-entered her life. At that time, Loretta was 31 years old and had been living with a man named Ernest Later for almost 10 years, even taking his last name. Although they were never officially married, they referred to each other as spouses. Shortly after reuniting with her mother, Katie decided to move in with her and Ernest. However, the family reunion did not go as smoothly as hoped. Their life changed significantly when she moved in. As a teenager, she began to rebel. Her mother and Ernest had trouble communicating with her. She often ran away from home, attended parties, and only called parents by their first names. The family never developed a close relationship with her. The situation changed when Katie started college. She changed from a rebellious person to a more docile person. Being very intelligent, she was accepted into several prestigious institutions. She graduated with a degree in chemistry and earned a doctorate in applied mathematics from Johns Hopkins University. While still a student, she met a young man named Anthony Passaniti, who would later become her husband. Anthony recounted that she was the first person to approach him to ask for gum, which led to their acquaintance. Their friendship soon blossomed into a romantic relationship. A year later, Katie and Anthony got married, and 2 years after that, they had a daughter. At that time, she was 27 years old. The family eventually moved to San Antonio, Texas. Here, Anthony worked as a physician assistant, and he had good career prospects in the medical field. Katie taught chemistry and mathematics at several schools, earning a good salary. She had a stable career, but she decided to leave her job to become a mother again. Family was always important to her, so she decided to adopt a little girl. During this time, Katie tries to reconnect with her mother, Loretta. Even though they rarely communicated with each other before, but now they are both trying to get closer. Loretta began visiting Katie and grandchildren frequently. By then, Loretta was already retired. Loretta and Ernest lived on a 25-acre estate in a small town called Keithville. They built a log house and a large barn for agricultural equipment. Ernest manages a small farm, which was an excellent way to earn extra money during retirement. In 2008, a major change occurred. A local mining company exploited a large gas field on the farm. To obtain the extraction permit, Ernest was paid $400,000, and overnight, made him quite rich. He invested the money in his own business. Since he already had everything he wanted, he continued managing his small company as usual. Everything seemed normal, but a new problem arose. One day, Loretta called Katie and asked her a strange question. She couldn't remember how much sugar she needed for the cake. From that moment on, her calls became increasingly strange. It seems that with age, she began to have memory problems. The same happened to Ernest. One day he went with Loretta to their daughter's house, Katie, for Thanksgiving. But halfway there, he suddenly stopped. It seemed that he became disoriented and got lost. Then, he turned the car around and went back home. After these incidents, Katie sent Loretta and Ernest to the hospital for examination. The doctors diagnosed they with the onset of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Katie still keeps in regular contact with Loretta, calling her almost every day, as she was very worried during this time. To help with the housework, they hired Tina Van Moerkeek, who moved to the farm with her husband, Chris, and their child, living in a trailer. Tina became Loretta's personal assistant and driver, as Loretta had completely lost her ability to drive. Meanwhile, Chris helped with the housework for the Luttrell family and worked on the farm where Loretta and Ernest lived. Ernest and Loretta's health rapidly deteriorated. Their memory issues became more severe, so they need more maids to do housework. They were frequently busy dealing with various matters. Ernest became irritable, visibly losing his memory. His awareness became muddled, and he became more aggressive. He blamed the neighbor for all his troubles. Katie has talked about this many times. In April 2010, Ernest went to his house and accused his neighbors of trespassing on his property, leading to a scandal that got out of hand. Katie, who was visiting Loretta, called the police and reported that Ernest had threatened to kill his neighbor. Sheriff's deputies detained Ernest and took him to the nearest medical center, where he underwent a psychiatric evaluation and received treatment for a while. His condition was poor, and upon arrival at the medical center, he was confused and did not know why he was brought there. While Ernest was in the hospital, Katie decided to help her mother, Loretta, solve the problem. She went to the medical center and presented a power of attorney over Ernest's property, which he had supposedly signed earlier. Katie insisted that Ernest remain in a nursing home for Alzheimer's treatment, as his behavior was unpredictable and aggressive. She felt that he could be a danger to himself and to others. However, he denied having threatened his neighbor or having had a conflict. According to him, he did not understand why he was in a medical facility and demanded to be sent home. The situation was unclear. Had Ernest really signed the power of attorney and just forgotten, or is there another motive in this? However, Katie kept him in the hospital for observation for a week to determine what was wrong with him. Throughout this period, even without treatment, he remained completely clear-minded. Ultimately, Ernest was discharged from the hospital because there was no reason to keep him there any longer. Shortly before noon on July 25, 2010, Loretta called 911. She reported that her husband, Ernest, had passed away. At first, it seemed like a typical report of someone who had died of natural causes. However, there was a hint of unease in her voice. The emergency services dispatcher asked Loretta to try to give artificial respiration to Ernest. However, she replied that it would no longer help and asked the rescuers to come with the police as soon as possible. The sheriff's deputies arrived at the crime scene within minutes. Outside the house, they found Loretta. It was known that she suffered from Alzheimer's. She encountered the police and seemed more confused than upset. She obviously didn't know what to do. The officers entered the house to investigate and discovered the body of Ernest in a pool of blood. Doctors confirmed his death, caused by 5 gunshot wounds. According to Loretta, when she returned home from church, she found the body of her husband Ernest lying in a pool of blood. She did not know what had happened to him. Her statement was confirmed by other parishioners. Indeed, she had been at church. Reinforcements were called to the scene. When the forensic experts arrived, they immediately began examining the crime scene and collecting evidence. They noticed that some valuables were missing from the house, including Ernest's car. Near the place where the car had been stolen, they found unusual boot prints with a unique design. Tina, the housekeeper, and Chris lived on Ernest's farm. They claimed they were not at the house during the murder and provided a store receipt as proof of their whereabouts, which confirmed their alibi. Meanwhile, detectives reached out to Loretta's closest relatives. They later learned she had a daughter, Katie, who lived in San Antonio, Texas. Upon hearing the tragic news, Katie traveled to support her. Investigators are currently having difficulty clarifying the incident. What happened at the farm that day? At the scene, police confirmed that Ernest had died tragically. It certainly wasn't him who ended his life, as there was no weapon nearby. Someone had killed him, and the gun was hidden by the killer. Finding the gun became a priority for the investigation because it could offer important clues. Ernest was shot at point-blank range, including in the head, leaving no chance of survival. He was found lying in a pool of his own blood, and the gun cabinet next to the room had been opened and emptied the ammo. Additionally, Ernest's pickup truck and several valuable items were missing. The truck was easy to locate because it had distinctive features, including a homemade fuel tank. Ernest used this tank to refuel his agricultural equipment. It had a large capacity, designed to supply equipment for 2 days. Thanks to these unique features, the truck was quickly found. Eric Crane was well acquainted with the police officer because he abused illegal substances. He had a rich criminal history, mainly due to his addiction and drunk driving. All his life, Eric was in and out of prison for short periods of time. He was found just 2 days after the murder. He was immediately arrested in the car and taken to the police station for official questioning. However, he began to categorically deny his involvement in the incident. He claimed that he was at work at the time, but his alibi was not confirmed by his colleagues. Besides, he also could not explain how he ended up driving Ernest's pickup truck. His boots had a unique pattern on the sole, resembles shoe prints found at the crime scene. However, at first they could not get him to confess. Eric was kept in custody during the investigation because it seemed he was pretending and not telling the truth. On the day he was arrested, a local TV crew found out and went to the auto repair shop where he worked. They interviewed his manager and colleagues, who revealed that he was absent from work at the time of the murder. Surprisingly, while they were there, the shop manager received a call from Eric, who was calling from prison. Eric informed his employer that he was in trouble and couldn't come to work. He also asked his boss to lie to the police, saying he was at work at the time. His boss then asked if he had really killed Ernest. Then, he shared a shocking story. He admitted to pulling the trigger and shooting Ernest, but claimed he was persuaded to do so by Tina, an employee who was also Loretta's driver. It turned out that Tina and Eric were lovers, and she had asked him to help with the crime. He claims that Loretta is the one behind it all. Eric claimed that Loretta lied and went to church during the crime to create a false alibi. She waited there until Ernest was killed. Afterward, Eric called Tina from prison to discuss details of the crime. A few hours later, a recording of this conversation reached the police station. Investigators needed to verify if Eric was truthful, if Tina and Loretta were involved in the murder. On July 28, Tina was brought in as a suspect. She denied any involvement and claimed ignorance of the incident, but her motives remained very suspicious. Ernest had always been very kind to Tina's, providing housing for her family and giving her a job with a stable income. In her situation, it would be wise to maintain this relationship for as long as possible. Why would she kill her benefactor? It seemed illogical. However, detectives suspected she was lying. To confirm, they searched her belongings and found a bank card belonging to Ernest in her purse. Checking the database, the police discovered that months before the murder, Ernest and Loretta had filed a complaint against Tina for stealing money. Eventually, they decided to forgive her without prosecution. Tina confesses that she continues to steal Ernest's money. Her husband, Chris, revealed that the night before the crime, she did not stay at home because they had a fight and she went to a hotel. It turned out that Tina had spent the night there with Eric, planning the attack on Ernest. After several hours of interrogation, she confessed that Eric murdered Ernest, but she claimed that Loretta was the mastermind. Loretta had approached Tina, saying that Ernest should die. Initially, she refused, but Loretta coerced her into participating. The motive for the crime was financial. Shortly before his death, Ernest had promised to pay off his granddaughter's tuition debts, i.e. Katie's daughter. The granddaughter was at risk of being expelled over a $50 shortfall, and Katie was struggling financially. However, when it came time to fulfill his promise, Ernest refused to pay the $50. Loretta was so angry that he was so stingy that she thought he deserved to die. Afterwards, Loretta asked Tina and Eric for help, promising to pay $11,000. The crime was meant to look like a robbery, so Loretta allowed Eric to take Ernest's gun and personal belongings. Consequently, the gun and several valuables were missing from the house. Eric stole the murder weapon from their home and then disposed of it. Of course, Tina and Eric's testimony was not enough to arrest Loretta. Before arresting Loretta, Tina was asked to call her. Her task was to talk to Loretta and try to get Loretta's to confess. She agreed because she wanted to make a deal with the prosecution to reduce her sentence. She also needed to testify against Eric and Loretta. Then, she phoned Loretta, the police recorded and listened to the call. According to the plan, she said that Eric would be released on bail in an hour. So, she needed $1,000 to cover his bail costs. Loretta agreed to pay and asked for more time to get the money. This provides evidence of Loretta's relationship with Tina and Eric, but could not obtain a confession to the murder. Ernest's funeral was held on July 29th. After the ceremony, Loretta was arrested as she left the cemetery. She was accused of hiring Eric to kill her husband, Ernest, and taken to the police station for questioning. Despite the accusations, she denied any involvement. The police pressured her, claiming she attended church that day, knowing Ernest would be killed. They alleged that she had orchestrated the crime. However, she remained firm, stating she attends church every Sunday. She also acted confused, repeatedly asking what she was guilty of. There is no concrete evidence against her, other than a phone call. It doesn't prove much. Loretta repeatedly claimed that she was always in church during the time of the crime. She mentioned her Alzheimer's disease and called the idea of her killing her husband absurd. She suggested that Tina, who had previously stolen money, may be involved in Ernest's murder. However, she denied any involvement herself. Her daughter, Katie, supported her claims and often shared this perspective with journalists. Even Ernest's family believed Loretta was not involved, pointing to her harmonious relationship with Ernest over the years. However, they later informed the police that they suspected Katie and insisted Katie should be more thoroughly investigated. It seems money is the motive. Ernest's farm was valued at around $1.5 million. Upon his death, the farm would pass to Loretta, and after her death, it will be passed on to Katie. Therefore, Katie focuses more on Ernest's assets. Because of this, Ernest's relatives decided to take the case to court. Nonetheless, Katie had a copy of Ernest's will, which allocated the property to Katie and her daughters, leaving the entire Ernest's family out of the inheritance. However, the dates in the will have many suspicious points. It was signed just 3 weeks before Ernest's death. His relatives believed it was either forged or that he was coerced into signing it while unaware of his actions. Consequently, they decided to contest the will in August 2010. By then, the investigation into Ernest's murder was nearly complete. There were 3 suspects: Loretta, believed to be the mastermind, Tina, an accomplice, and Eric, the executor of the plan. However, detectives suspected a 4th person might be involved. This was Katie, who had the strongest motive and stood to gain the most from the tragedy. Ernest's family insists that he will not pass on his inheritance to Loretta's stepdaughter, Katie. Ernest's family is certain that he wouldn't leave his inheritance to Loretta's stepdaughter, Katie. Ernest was known for being very frugal, even stingy. He wouldn't spend money carelessly or leave his family without an inheritance. Besides, he never had a close relationship with Katie, so there was no way he would leave everything to her. While the prosecution was preparing to try Loretta, Tina, and Eric, Ernest's family filed a lawsuit claiming inheritance rights. By then, the battle over the inheritance had been ongoing for several months. As police looked into the details of the incident, they began to suspect foul play. The main goal is to prove that Katie's copy of the inheritance will is a forgery. The copy of the will bears the highly suspicious signature of a notary named Penny Penner. On October 19th, the police came to see Penny, the notary. She initially claimed that she had signed the documents on July 1st, nearly a month before Ernest's death. She stated that she signed them at home, in the presence of several witnesses, including Loretta. However, she later confessed that the will was indeed forged, as she signed it after Ernest's death. When pressured, she revealed that Katie had come to her after Ernest was murdered. According to Penny, Katie explained that Ernest had died suddenly without having time to properly draft the will and that he had no living relatives to claim the inheritance. Katie was concerned that her mother, Loretta, who suffers from Alzheimer's disease, will have difficulty registering property, resulting in the property belonging to the state. The notary Penny feeling sympathy for Katie. She did not investigate the true circumstances and decided to help her. However, facing criminal charges, she chose to disclose the truth to the investigators. To avoid legal issues, she agreed to assist the detective by making several phone calls to Katie. Her task was to get Katie to confess to forging the documents. Following the plan, she called Katie, claiming she had problems with the police and needed details of the incident to draft a new document to distract the investigation. Katie answered several questions, which led to her conviction for involvement in the forgery of the will. The police had enough evidence to search Katie's house in San Antonio. They came to search for documents related to her forging of the will. When the officers entered, Katie reached for her purse. Fearing she might have a weapon, they handcuffed her. However, the purse contained no gun, only a letter with instructions for creating a fake, which she intended to destroy. In the house, they discovered boxes of documents, including copies of power of attorney for the house and notes regarding Ernest's health. It appeared she had been monitoring him for a long time, possibly waiting for the right moment to act. The police hoped to find evidence that she was involved in Ernest's murder, but they found nothing. Investigators suspected she had planned the murder with Loretta, but lacked direct evidence. Ultimately, they had to release Katie and remove her handcuffs. However, they did not give up. Instead, they decided to change their approach. After visiting Katie's house, the investigators decided to change their approach. Meanwhile, Loretta had been in jail for a long time without bail. Her Alzheimer's disease was worsening, and she was declared incompetent to stand trial due to her health. Consequently, she was sent to a psychiatric hospital for criminals indefinitely. During this time, she confessed, but her confession was not considered significant because of her condition. At the trial, the prosecution doubted that Loretta could have planned the crime alone. It seemed clear that she had assistance, probably from her daughter, Katie. After that, investigators focused on Eric Crane. In June 2011, he pleaded guilty to the crime in exchange for life sentences without the possibility of parole, thus avoiding the death penalty. As part of the deal, Eric was required to testify against everyone involved in the crime. Then, the detectives pressured Tina by threatening that they would find a way to get her the death penalty. This pressure was enough to make her confess. She pleaded guilty and agreed to testify against the other conspirators. Her interrogation was recorded on video, exposing criminal activities. Tina revealed that Loretta planned the crime and convinced her to kill Ernest. Katie was also aware of the plan and conspired with Loretta. In return, Loretta promised Tina that she and her family could live in Ernest's house indefinitely. More than a year had passed since Ernest's murder, and finally, the investigation had gathered all the necessary evidence. On March 2, 2012, the police returned to San Antonio and went to Katie's house. They forced their way in, breaking down the door. Katie's husband watched as she was handcuffed and taken away. On April 25, 2013, Katie appeared in court. She accused of committing murder in July 2010. She faced the possibility of life imprisonment without parole. The prosecution argued that her sole motive was to take over Ernest's farm. At first, she intended to put him in a nursing home to take over the house. She planned to fabricate a story about a scandal with the neighbors, then trick him into signing the power of attorney. When this plan failed, she allegedly turned to a more violent alternative. By this time, Loretta's Alzheimer's disease had progressed, but Ernest remained in good health. Katie had always had a poor relationship with him, and it was clear that he would deny her an inheritance if her mother, Loretta, died first. This gave her a motive to eliminate him, with one theory suggesting the murder was staged to look like a failed robbery. At trial, Tina claimed that she was forced to participate in the case without any other choice. She stated that Katie pressured and threatened her, trying to persuade her by promising payment. However, Tina's testimony was not convincing to the prosecutor's office. The prosecution's other key witness was Eric. Contrary to expectations, Eric testified that discussions about the murder plan only involved Tina. He claimed he never discussed it with Katie or Loretta, but suspected Loretta's involvement. Later, he added that if Katie had been involved, he would have known, but he was hearing about her involvement for the first time. The defense presented arguments to prove Katie's innocence by focusing on document forgery. According to the lawyer, Katie had indeed used a notary's services to prevent her mother from receiving an inheritance, but this has nothing to do with the murder. Loretta did not attend the hearings due to health issues. The prosecution played a recording of Loretta's testimony where she admitted involvement in the murder, but she didn't mention anything about Katie. On May 14, 2013, after just an hour and a half of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. Katie Passaniti was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and forging multiple documents. She received a life sentence without parole. As they left the courtroom, Ernest's family thanked each juror for their decision. They succeeded in contesting the will and inherited Ernest's entire estate. Despite this, Katie continued to assert her innocence, visibly shocked and fearful after the verdict. Tina, who cooperated with the prosecution, avoided the death penalty but was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Loretta continued her treatment until her death and never appeared in court. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Terry McAdams. The main character in today's story is Terry McAdams, a vibrant and active 22-year-old from Arlington, Texas. Since her teenage years, she enjoyed driving around the neighborhoods in her convertible. She often spent time in the city with friends, listening to music. Terry was a bright and popular cheerleader who always drew attention but remained modest and well-mannered. She deeply loved her sisters, Hopper and Pamela, and shared a close bond with all her relatives. Terry acted as a mentor for her sisters, bridging the gap between them and their mother. She enjoyed dancing with them and even taught them how to drive. Everyone who knew Terry described her as a person who loved life. After graduating from high school, she enrolled in the University of Arkansas. Before completing her degree, she decided to move to Arlington to be with her fiancée, Karen Anderson, who was a few years older and had already graduated. After graduation, she planned to start a career and marry Karen, who proposed to her. Since 1984, local newspapers have been reporting on the murders in the Fort Worth area. During this time, Terry was studying at university and took the threat very seriously. She was genuinely afraid for her life, a concern she shared frequently with Karen and family. To protect herself, Terry made several significant changes. She quit her well-paying job in Irving, where she had to drive every day and return home in the dark. Understanding the potential danger, she decided it wasn't worth the risk of driving at night. Despite being young and energetic, Terry began to live a very cautious lifestyle. She stopped going out at night, avoided parties, and only left her home during the day when accompanied by Karen. She even felt anxious about going grocery shopping and often called her mother multiple times a day to express her fears. Terry was genuinely worried about the situation, especially since the authorities had not yet identified the criminal, leaving the streets of Arlington feeling unsafe. Around the same time, Texas police bodies formed a task force consisting of experienced experts to look into a series of violent crimes and prevent further massacres. They believed that a serial killer, or potentially multiple terrorists, were active in the area. Terry felt particularly anxious because she fit the profile of the victims. They were all attractive, around her age, and lived nearby. It was difficult for her to cope, but Karen provided strong support. She admitted to her mother and sisters that being alone was the most frightening part. To help her feel safer, Karen decided to leave his job and accept a new high-paying position closer to home, though it occasionally required business trips to nearby cities. During her moments of panic, she limited her outings and rushed home after school. For any important tasks, she aimed to handle them early in the morning and always sought someone to accompany her. On the morning of February 13, 1985, the local police station received a disturbing call. An employee responsible for technical maintenance at the residential complex where Terry lived reported that he was unable to gain access to the apartment. When the police arrived, no one answered the door, and they were unable to reach the Terry's relatives. As a result, they decided to speak with local residents. Neighbors confirmed the repairman's account. They also could not contact Terry but reported hearing suspicious noises coming from her apartment. The police then decided to break down the door to enter her apartment. Inside, they discovered a gruesome scene. Terry's body was found in the bedroom on the bed. Terry had been raped and brutally beaten with a blunt object. Based on the condition of her body and the blood evidence, it seemed the crime took place at night or early in the morning before the police were called. Forensic experts quickly arrived at the scene to begin their investigation. It was clear that there had been a struggle and Terry had fought back. They found numerous defensive wounds on her arms and upper body, and her face was severely disfigured from a prolonged beating. There were signs of strangulation on her neck, but the forensic expert believes the attacker did not kill her that way. Instead, she died from a severe head injury. She also suffered brutal rape, but it is unclear whether this occurred before or after her murder. DNA traces were found on her bed linen and underwear, but at that time, it was not possible to identify the owner. The analysis methods were still developing and could not be used in the investigation. Additionally, there were no surveillance cameras or geolocation tracking available. The situation became more complicated when local people learned about the tragedy and needed psychological support. The robbery theory was quickly dismissed as many valuables were still intact in the apartment, including conspicuous items. It was clear that robbery was not the motive. The police began interviewing Terry's friends and relatives, looking for people who might have had personal motives such as jealousy, hatred, or revenge. However, Terry McAdams was known to be very kind, friendly, and non-confrontational, and none of her relatives could think of anyone who would want to harm her. Police searched the crime scene but did not find the murder weapon, which forensic experts believe was a hammer or a similar metal tool. They did discover a cigarette butt in the apartment, indicating it likely belonged to the killer. Unfortunately, the technology available at the time was insufficient to extract DNA from the cigarette, and the saliva remnants were too small to analyze. The only useful information obtained was the brand of cigarettes the killer used. One theory being considered is that a serial killer may be responsible for the crimes. Police have looked into Terry's murder and other cases in the nearby area and believe the suspect may not have known the victims and the attacks appear to have occurred spontaneously. The attacker aimed to avoid detection and leave no evidence behind. So he chose to enter through the back sliding balcony door instead of the main entrance. There were no clear signs of a break-in on the outer window frame. It is probable that he used a tree, growing a few meters away from the apartment building's wall, to reach the balcony. Unfortunately, aside from these basic observations, police were unable to gather any useful information. Police spoke with the family of the Terry, particularly her mother and sisters, who had the closest bond with her. They were all understandably shocked by the tragedy. Terry, known for her cheerful demeanor, seemed incapable of having enemies, especially ones who would wish to harm her so cruelly. Disturbingly, it appeared that Terry had a sense of impending danger. She was afraid to leave her home, fearing she could become a victim. Tragically, she was killed in her own apartment. As news of the attack spread throughout the city, the local community began to believe that there was a killer on the loose, capable of breaking into any apartment. They suspected that he might have targeted attractive women, stalked them, and attacked them. Ultimately, the community felt that no one was safe, especially young women who might be the next targets. Residents decided to take matters into their own hands. Over the next few months, gun and ammunition sales skyrocketed as more people began arming themselves. Meanwhile, public pressure began to mount on the police for answers. The county sheriff appeared on a local television station, asking anyone with information about the crime to come forward. After Terry's murder was reported on the local news, police received numerous calls, but the information did not help the investigation. Initially, Terry's fiancée Karen was considered the prime suspect, but he was away on business at the time and had an alibi. The police tried to include him in the murder profile to close the case and appease public concern, but this was not possible. Terry's friends could not believe that he could commit such a crime. After his alibi of being away on business was confirmed, he was removed from the suspect list. Police spoke with Terry's relatives to reconstruct a timeline of events that took place on February 12. Terry arrived at school around 4 p.m. After leaving the university, she got into her car and drove home. Once home, she changed clothes and went shopping, again alone. Although she usually liked to invite her friends along, they were all busy that day. First, she went to the nearest grocery store to buy ingredients for a cake she planned to make for Karen to celebrate Valentine's Day. He was scheduled to return from a business trip the next morning. Store employees confirmed that they saw Terry at the checkout and even provided a receipt for her purchase. The receipt confirmed that she had purchased ingredients for baking. They determined that she left the store at around 6:30 p.m. Police questioned anyone who may have seen her at the time, looking for any suspicious behavior, such as someone following her. However, no one reported anything unusual. It appeared to be a routine shopping trip. Terry paid for her items and walked out. Terry went home and decided not to go out again, as she had scheduled a visit from a repairman the next morning to fix some wiring issues. That evening, none of the neighbors were home, and those who did hear strange noises were unable to fully grasp the seriousness of the situation. The sounds faded relatively quickly, leading people to calm down. Typically, police would look for the killer among the victim's close acquaintances. However, this time it wasn't the case. A few months ago, Terry was preparing for her wedding. Karen had given her a $5,000 engagement ring, but the police were unable to find the ring during their investigation. Initially, it was thought that the ring's disappearance could be a robbery gone wrong. However, further investigation revealed that this theory was unlikely, as nothing else was missing. Given its value, a campaign was launched to find the ring. Approximately 250 flyers with a picture of the ring were distributed to local pawn shops, including those in Fort Worth and Dallas, informing them of the missing jewelry. Despite this effort, no one reported the ring to the police. The police followed up on all potential leads, but none of them came to fruition. All of the suspects questioned provided alibis. The police focused on people with a history of violence who lived in the area. However, the investigation began to stall. Terry's relatives made efforts to promote the case. They regularly reached out to the public through various media channels. They appeared on TV and radio and distributed many flyers, but their efforts yielded no results. Eventually, the murder of Terry McAdams became an unsolved case that was filed in the archives. The Terry's family continued to seek justice, but the police lacked the necessary resources and evidence to advance the investigation. The case went cold for 36 years until 2021, when a team of experienced police and forensic experts was assembled to revisit forgotten cases, utilizing new technologies. Among these cases is that of Terry McAdams. Police used advanced DNA testing methods, allowing them to re-examine old evidence. Biological material from the perpetrator was found on Terry's underwear and bed sheets. She fought back during the attack, leaving traces of the perpetrator's skin under her fingernails. A cigarette was taken from the archives and sent for testing because the killer's saliva might be on it. This thorough analysis helped create a profile of a likely suspect. However, when this profile was checked against the database of known offenders, there were no matches. Terry's family hoped to find the killer who had been on the run for decades. Unfortunately, despite their hopes, the case remained unsolved for many more years. Fortunately, the investigation continued and eventually decided to use a new method, genetic genealogy technology, which required the assistance of the FBI. In August 2023, After exploring all possible options, the police department reached out to the Federal Bureau of Investigations in Dallas for help with the Terry McAdams case. They planned to analyze the DNA samples collected from the crime scene and the victim's body. This genetic testing aimed to create a family tree of the suspect, allowing the investigation to extend beyond the existing database, which only included known offenders. By using genealogical research, police could significantly increase the chances of identifying the suspect's relatives, particularly close ones. This method is considered very effective. At the time this study was conducted, the database had grown to the point where the probability of finding a match was close to 100%. The investigation was successful in identifying a man named Bernard Sharp, an American who had a notable history with the police in the 1980s. At the time of the crime, Bernard was 30 years old and married. He was also a neighbor of Terry, and Karen had a close relationship with him. During the investigation following the arrest, Bernard contacted the police and supported the victim's family. He provided an alibi that the police initially found suspicious, however. His wife later confirmed his alibi, leading to him being cleared of suspicion. Ultimately, all suspicions against him were cleared and the investigation continued without results. On the evening of November 3, 1985, a man called the police, claiming to be Bernard's wife's brother. He reported that he had been shot and needed assistance. After investigating, the police discovered that an armed criminal had attacked him, his sister, and her friend at their home. When the police arrived at the scene, it appeared to be a horrific massacre. He recounted that when he returned home with his sister and her friend, he found Bernard waiting for them with a gun. Bernard opened fire, killing the two women on the spot and wounding Bernard's wife's brother. Bernard's wife's brother was injured in the shooting but escaped to a neighbor's house. His injuries were not life-threatening. Bernard may not have expected his wife's brother to be there, and the shooting may have been premeditated. When Bernard realized his plan had failed, he began shooting at people. In addition to the two dead women, Bernard's wife's brother was also found wounded at the scene. Bernard was shot in the head and died from his injuries on November 3, 2008. Probably, the decision to voluntarily end his life was a factor in the tragic events that unfolded. It is now clear why the attacks on young girls in the city stopped after this tragedy. Bernard was a serial killer. During the investigation, no witnesses came forward to confirm his plans or his connection to the murders of Terry and the other girls. However, several close friends of Bernard's reported that he knew Terry's killer but did not name him. Several months after Terry's murder, Bernard was found dead after killing his wife and her friend, and seriously injuring his wife's brother. Police were unable to locate his body for an autopsy, so they had to take other measures to determine his connection to the murder of Terry McAdams. Police traveled out of state to meet with one of Bernard's registered relatives. Although the man did not want his name linked to the crime, he eventually agreed to provide a DNA sample. Forensic genealogy helped confirm Bernard's guilt. At the time of Bernard's death, police were unable to compare his DNA with the DNA found at the crime scene. They were unable to establish a connection between his previous attacks. Before killing his relatives, Bernard had only used violence and had not used a gun. Furthermore, Bernard's fingerprints were not in the police database, meaning that no matches could be found. Given the nature of the attacks, police suspect he may have been involved in other crimes in his neighborhood. He appears to fit the profile of a serial rapist and murderer. Bernard's criminal record has been turned over to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, an agency known for its crime-solving abilities. However, there has been no confirmed evidence of his involvement in any other cases. For Terry's family, identifying the killer brought them relief. After 39 years, the case was finally closed. This breakthrough was made possible by new technology. Terry's sisters appeared on a local television channel and shared their feelings about the case being solved through several interviews. After nearly 40 years, they say it would have been better to see justice in person. However, they take comfort in knowing that this dangerous criminal stopped his criminal ways long ago and cannot harm anyone again. If he had not stopped, many more innocent women could have been victimized by him over the years.